Happiness is a lie. At least the kind you've been chasing. You think it's in a better job, more money, a perfect relationship. But tell me, how many times have you gotten what you wanted, only to feel empty again? How many moments of joy have slipped through your fingers, leaving you craving the next distraction? The truth is brutal. Most people will never be truly happy, not because they're unlucky, but because they're looking in the wrong place. They let their emotions control them. They depend on others for validation. They waste their lives chasing comfort, avoiding discomfort, and wondering why they feel miserable. But what if I told you there's a way to stop the cycle? A way to build happiness so strong that no failure, no rejection, and no setback can shake it. The ancient Stoics discovered this secret thousands of years ago, and once you apply it, you'll never experience happiness the same way again. This isn't about fake positivity. It's not about suppressing emotions or pretending to be happy. It's about building a mind so unbreakable that no matter what happens, you stay calm, strong, and content. By the end of this guide, you'll understand why most people will never be happy and how to escape their fate. You'll learn how to stop seeking happiness and start creating it. And most importantly, you'll discover the exact Stoic techniques to master your emotions and find peace that lasts. If you've ever felt like something's missing, like happiness is always just out of reach, this is the video you've been waiting for. Let's begin. Happiness. This word is sold to you everywhere. It's in the self-help books, the motivational speeches, the shiny social media posts, the products promising you fulfillment in a bottle. It's dangled in front of you like a prize, something you must chase, earn, and hold on to before it slips away. And that's exactly why most people never truly find it, because the very act of running toward happiness is what keeps it out of reach. This is where the Stoics turned the entire idea of happiness upside down. They didn't see it as something you acquire, nor something that depends on perfect conditions. They didn't measure it in highs and lows, nor in external achievements. They defined it in a way that most people today would struggle to understand. And yet, their version of happiness, the one rooted in deep contentment and inner strength, has stood the test of time, while modern ideas of happiness keep failing, leaving people anxious, empty, and constantly craving more. Happiness is not what you think it is, and the more you chase it, the more miserable you become. This is the paradox at the heart of human suffering. Every time you tell yourself, "I'll be happy when," you push happiness further away. Every time you try to control everything around you to feel good, you set yourself up for disappointment. Every time you think happiness is about achieving, acquiring, or being validated by others, you give up control of the one thing that actually determines it, your own mind. The Stoics saw happiness as a byproduct, not a goal. They understood that chasing pleasure and avoiding discomfort leads to the exact opposite of happiness: dependence, fear, and suffering. They recognized that most people are prisoners of their own desires, enslaved by the need for validation, approval, and comfort. True happiness, they believed, has nothing to do with getting what you want and everything to do with being free from needing anything at all. This is why the modern world struggles. Everywhere you turn, you're told that happiness comes from the outside: status, wealth, admiration, relationships, or even the perfect mindset. But the more you attach your well-being to these things, the more fragile your happiness becomes. Because as soon as they change, as soon as life takes something away from you, your happiness collapses. The Stoics weren't interested in a happiness that depended on circumstances. They wanted something unshakable, something that didn't disappear when life got hard, when plans failed, when people disappointed them. Their definition of happiness wasn't about feeling good all the time. It was about being at peace no matter what. It wasn't about controlling life, but about controlling your response to it. It wasn't about avoiding suffering, but about transforming it into wisdom. The modern world has it backwards. It tells you to pursue pleasure and run from pain. It tells you to seek external validation while ignoring internal growth. It tells you that happiness is a feeling when in reality it's a state of being. And unless you understand this, you will always be searching, always needing something more, always feeling like happiness is just out of reach. Happiness is not something to chase. It is something to cultivate. It is not something to find. It is something to become. And once you stop running after it, once you stop measuring it by external things, you begin to understand what the Stoics knew all along. Happiness is not in pleasure, but in freedom. Not in acquiring, but in letting go. Not in changing the world around you, but in mastering the world within you. Most people think happiness is about feeling good, about experiencing pleasure and avoiding pain. They structure their entire lives around this belief, choosing comfort over growth, ease over challenge, short-term gratification over long-term fulfillment. And in doing so, they become slaves to their own desires, dependent on things they cannot control, trapped in a cycle of craving and disappointment. The Stoics saw through this illusion. To them, happiness wasn't about pleasure, but about peace. It wasn't about having everything you want, but about wanting nothing that isn't within your control. This is why they emphasized virtues over emotions, wisdom over comfort, discipline over indulgence. They understood that a person who chases pleasure is not free, because their happiness depends on circumstances, and anything that depends on circumstances is fragile. The pursuit of happiness, as modern culture defines it, leads to misery because it creates dependence. If your happiness is tied to wealth, what happens when you lose money? If it is tied to relationships, what happens when someone leaves? If it is tied to success, what happens when you fail? The more conditions you place on happiness, the weaker it becomes. This is why the Stoics cultivated inner contentment. Marcus Aurelius, a man who had everything, power, status, luxury, did not see happiness in any of it. He journaled daily about how fleeting life was, how unreliable fortune could be, and how true happiness comes only from within. Seneca, despite his immense wealth, constantly reminded himself that external things do not create happiness. Only a disciplined and virtuous mind can. Epictetus, born a slave, had nothing but his thoughts, and yet he spoke of happiness as something no one could take from him, because it was never in external things to begin with. The world tells you that happiness comes from the outside. The Stoics tell you that happiness is an inside job. The world tells you to chase it. The Stoics tell you to stop running. The world tells you to seek pleasure. The Stoics tell you to seek wisdom. And only one of these paths leads to lasting peace. One of the biggest traps of modern life is the belief that happiness is something that must be pursued, that if you just work harder, achieve more, look better, gain more followers, or find the right relationship, you will finally feel complete. But this is a lie, because happiness is not the result of getting everything you want. It is the result of wanting less. It is the result of detaching from the illusion that external things will ever make you whole. The greatest freedom in life is not getting what you want, but no longer needing it. When you understand this, you stop being a prisoner to circumstances. You stop needing everything to go your way. You stop fearing loss because you no longer base your happiness on things that can be taken from you. This is what the Stoics mastered, the ability to be at peace, no matter what. This does not mean rejecting pleasure. It does not mean avoiding joy. It means no longer being controlled by them. It means finding happiness in what you already have, rather than suffering over what you don't. It means realizing that everything external is temporary, and that the only lasting peace comes from within. External validation is one of the biggest illusions of happiness. People chase approval, recognition, admiration, thinking these things will finally make them feel worthy. But the moment your happiness depends on the opinions of others, you're no longer in control of it. You hand over your peace to people who might not even care about you, to a society that constantly changes its standards, to a world that never stops demanding more from you. True happiness is not found in being liked, in being admired, in being praised. It is found in being free from the need for any of it. A person who is truly happy does not seek validation. They seek truth. They do not measure their worth by others. They measure it by their own integrity. They do not chase approval. They chase virtue. And in doing so, they become untouchable. The freedom of inner contentment is the ability to wake up every day and not need anything outside of yourself to feel at peace. It is knowing that no matter what happens, whether you succeed or fail, whether people love you or hate you, whether life rewards you or challenges you, you are in control of your own mind. This is the ultimate power. This is the ultimate happiness. And this is why the Stoics did not chase it. They lived it. Most people spend their lives chasing happiness, but what they truly want isn't happiness at all. It's fulfillment. Happiness is fleeting. It comes and goes, rising and falling like waves, always dependent on circumstances. One moment, life is good, and you feel happy. The next, something changes, and it's gone. And this is why happiness, as most people define it, will always be fragile. The Stoics understood this. They weren't interested in temporary highs. They wanted something deeper, something unshakable. They called it eudaimonia. This wasn't just happiness in the way people understand it today. It was true fulfillment, living a life of meaning, guided by wisdom, virtue, and inner peace. It was not about feeling good all the time, but about being whole, being complete, being in harmony with oneself and the world. This is where most people go wrong. They confuse pleasure with fulfillment. They seek momentary joy, thinking it will lead to lasting peace. They chase external rewards, hoping they will create inner satisfaction. But the Stoics saw through this illusion. They knew that pleasure is deceptive. It feels good in the moment, but it does not nourish the soul. It can be taken away as quickly as it arrives, leaving a person restless, always needing more. True fulfillment, on the other hand, is something no one can take from you. It does not come from wealth, success, relationships, or recognition. It comes from living with purpose, from acting with integrity, from cultivating a mind that is strong and steady, regardless of what happens in the external world. It is the kind of happiness that is not dependent on circumstances. It is the kind of contentment that does not break under pressure. It is the kind of peace that lasts a lifetime. Most people don't realize that pleasure and happiness are not the same thing. Pleasure is easy to get. Anyone can experience it. You eat a good meal, you buy something new, you receive a compliment, and for a moment, you feel happy. But that happiness fades quickly, and soon you are left wanting more. The cycle repeats. And before you know it, your entire life is spent running after things that only satisfy you for a short time. This is why people who seem to have everything, money, fame, power, can still feel empty inside. Because what they have is pleasure, not fulfillment. Fulfillment is different. It is not found in external things, but in the way you live. It comes from the choices you make, the discipline you develop, the character you build. It is the satisfaction of knowing that you're living according to your highest values, that you're not compromising your integrity, that you're becoming the person you were meant to be. This is why the Stoics prioritized virtue over pleasure, because they understood that pleasure is unreliable, but virtue is permanent. Living a life of virtue does not mean rejecting joy. It means not being controlled by it. It means understanding that pleasure is a byproduct, not a goal. That the deepest form of happiness comes not from indulging, but from mastering oneself. A person who lives with wisdom and discipline will experience moments of joy, just like anyone else. But unlike those who rely on pleasure to feel good, their happiness is not dependent on it. They can lose everything and still be at peace, because what they value most is something that cannot be taken away, their own integrity. This is why the Stoics did not pursue happiness in the way most people do. They did not see it as a feeling to chase, but as a result of living well. They believed that fulfillment comes not from seeking comfort, but from cultivating strength. Not from avoiding challenges, but from facing them with courage. Not from getting what you want, but from learning to be content with what you have. A person who chases pleasure will always be at the mercy of the world. They will always be dependent on something outside of themselves to feel good. But a person who pursues virtue will always be in control, because their happiness does not come from what happens to them, but from how they respond to life. Most people today are caught in a cycle of desire and dissatisfaction. They think that if they just achieve one more thing, earn a little more money, receive a little more recognition, they will finally be happy. But once they get what they wanted, they realize it wasn't enough. So they set a new goal, chase after a new pleasure, hoping that this time it will fulfill them. But it never does, because the problem is not that they haven't achieved enough. The problem is that they are looking for happiness in the wrong place. The Stoics knew that lasting fulfillment is not about acquiring, but about becoming. It is about shaping your character, mastering your mind, living with wisdom. It is about understanding that real happiness is not about what you have, but about who you are. A person who is virtuous does not need to chase happiness, because they already have everything they need within them. This is why the Stoics valued self-discipline, resilience, and inner strength. Because they understood that true happiness is not about avoiding hardship, but about developing the ability to face it without losing your peace. They knew that fulfillment does not come from making life easier, but from becoming stronger. It does not come from getting what you want, but from learning to be at peace with what is. Most people believe that happiness is about feeling good. The Stoics believed that happiness is about being good. It is about living in alignment with your highest values, about acting with integrity even when no one is watching, about choosing wisdom over impulse, courage over comfort, discipline over indulgence. Because in the end, a person who has everything but lacks virtue will never feel fulfilled. But a person who has nothing but lives with wisdom will never feel lacking. This is why the Stoics saw virtue as the highest good, because they understood that everything else, pleasure, success, recognition, is temporary, but virtue is eternal. It is the only thing that truly belongs to you, the only thing that no one can take away, the only thing that can bring you real, lasting peace. The modern world tells you that happiness is about getting more. The Stoics tell you that happiness is about needing less. The modern world tells you to seek pleasure. The Stoics tell you to seek wisdom. The modern world tells you that fulfillment comes from the outside. The Stoics tell you that fulfillment comes from within. And when you understand this, you stop chasing, you stop searching, you stop running after things that were never meant to satisfy you. You realize that happiness is not something to find, but something to cultivate. That fulfillment is not something to pursue, but something to become. That true peace is not in pleasure, but in mastery of the self. This is eudaimonia, the state of deep, lasting fulfillment that comes from living with virtue. And once you stop measuring happiness by external things, once you stop being a slave to pleasure, once you start living with wisdom, you experience a kind of peace that nothing in the external world can shake. This is the happiness the Stoics pursued. This is the happiness that does not depend on circumstances. This is the happiness that cannot be lost. Most people live as if life is supposed to be easy, as if problems are mistakes, as if hardship is unfair. They resent difficulties, complain about obstacles, and resist the very things that could make them stronger. But what if every problem was an opportunity? What if the worst experiences in life were not setbacks, but stepping stones? This is the power of perspective. The ability to reframe challenges is the foundation of inner peace. Because suffering is not caused by events themselves, it is caused by the way we interpret them. The Stoics understood this deeply. They knew that external circumstances are unpredictable, but the one thing always within our control is how we choose to see them. Life will present hardships. People will disappoint you. Plans will fail. Uncertainty will be constant. But none of these things have the power to disturb you unless you allow them to. Your mind is the gatekeeper of your suffering and your peace. If you master perspective, you master your reality. This is why the Stoics practiced amor fati, the love of fate. They did not simply accept what happened to them, they embraced it fully, as if it were exactly what they needed. They saw misfortunes as training, difficulties as teachers, pain as purification. They understood that reality does not bend to personal desires. Resisting it only leads to frustration. But when you align yourself with the natural flow of life, when you stop wishing for things to be different and start working with what is, you become unshakable. Most people react to problems with frustration. They ask, "Why is this happening to me?" But the Stoic reframes the question, "How can this serve me?" A person who sees an obstacle as unfair will be crushed by it. A person who sees it as an opportunity will use it to grow. The same event, the same struggle, the same loss. Two different people will experience it in completely different ways, simply because of their perspective. There is nothing more powerful than this shift in thinking. A person who believes life is against them will always feel like a victim, but a person who believes life is working for them, even in hardship, will always find a way to rise. This is not positive thinking. This is not about pretending everything is good. It is about seeing things as they are, without distortion, without unnecessary suffering, and finding the best possible way forward. Every difficulty in life contains a lesson, but most people never see it because they are too focused on complaining about the problem instead of learning from it. The Stoics trained their minds to welcome challenges because they understood that hardship was not an interruption, it was the path. They believed that adversity builds the soul, that the fire of struggle refines character, that discomfort is not something to avoid, but something to embrace. And because of this, they were never truly defeated. They saw setbacks as temporary, failures as feedback, difficulties as exercises in strength. Life will always throw unexpected obstacles in your way. Some will be small, some will shake you to your core, but the way you respond determines whether they break you or build you. A weak mind sees misfortune as a punishment. A strong mind sees it as preparation. The only difference between the two is perspective. Many people believe happiness is found in ease, but the Stoics knew that real peace comes from being unshaken in difficulty. The ability to reframe obstacles is not just a technique, it is a way of life. It is the difference between being controlled by circumstances and using them as fuel for growth. It is the mindset that allows you to navigate chaos without losing yourself. This is why amor fati is such a radical concept. Most people spend their lives trying to change what they cannot control, hoping that if they just arrange everything perfectly, they will finally find peace. But peace does not come from the outside. It comes from radical acceptance. It comes from no longer fighting reality, from no longer believing that things should be different. It comes from understanding that every experience, good or bad, is shaping you, preparing you, making you stronger. The reason most people struggle with difficulties is because they resist them. They label situations as bad or unfair, and in doing so, they create suffering where there doesn't need to be any. The Stoic, however, does not label events in this way. They do not see hardship as misfortune, but as training. They do not see obstacles as interruptions, but as opportunities. They do not waste time wishing for easier conditions. They focus on becoming stronger. To master perspective is to free yourself from unnecessary suffering. It is to understand that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. It is to realize that every event in life can serve you if you allow it to. And once you grasp this, life stops feeling like a battle. You stop fighting against reality. Stop trying to control the uncontrollable. Stop resisting the flow of events. Instead, you move with life, using everything, especially the difficulties, to make you wiser, more resilient, more at peace. There is nothing in this world that can break a person who has mastered their perspective. A storm may come, but they stand firm. A loss may occur, but they do not collapse. A hardship may arise, but they turn it into fuel. Because they understand that life is not supposed to be free of problems. It is supposed to challenge you, sharpen you, refine you. And if you meet every challenge with the right mindset, you will find a kind of peace that no misfortune can take away. This is what the Stoics knew. This is what made them unbreakable. And this is why perspective is the key to true inner peace. People live in chains without realizing it. They believe they are free, but their happiness is held hostage by things they cannot control. They chase pleasure, status, approval, and material wealth, thinking these things will finally bring them peace. But every time they reach for happiness, it slips through their fingers. They want more. They need more. And in that endless cycle of desire, they become prisoners of their own cravings. This is the great illusion of life, the belief that fulfillment comes from acquiring, from holding on, from controlling. But the more a person clings, the more they suffer. A person who cannot let go is never at peace. They fear losing what they have. They resent not getting what they want. And they exhaust themselves chasing things that will never truly satisfy them. They have given their power away to external things, believing that happiness exists outside of themselves. But happiness is not something to be found. It is something to be cultivated by removing what stands in its way. The Stoics understood this deeply. They did not reject wealth, love, or success, but they refused to be owned by them. They saw that attachment was the root of suffering, not because possessions, ambitions, or relationships are bad, but because clinging to them creates fear, anxiety, and disappointment. A person who believes they need something to be happy will always live in fear of losing it. A person who ties their self-worth to an outcome will always be at the mercy of things outside their control. This is why the Stoics practiced non-attachment, not as an act of rejection, but as a path to freedom. Letting go is the most radical act a person can take. It is to strip life of unnecessary suffering. It is to remove the conditions placed on happiness. It is to say, I can have this, but I do not need it. I can lose this, but I'm still whole. I can walk away, and I will still be at peace. This is not indifference. This is not apathy. It is the ability to engage with life fully without being enslaved by it. A person attached to material wealth is never free. They may have riches, but their mind is in chains. They live in fear of losing what they have, of not having enough, of never being satisfied. Their happiness depends on numbers in a bank account, on possessions, on things that rust and decay. But a person who sees wealth as indifferent, as something that can be used but not clung to, moves through life with ease. If money comes, they use it wisely. If it goes, they remain unshaken. Their peace does not depend on what is in their hands, but on the strength of their mind. It is the same with relationships. A person who is desperate for love, who fears solitude, who needs constant validation, will always suffer. They will compromise their dignity to keep people in their lives. They will tolerate disrespect, betray their own values, and lose themselves in the process of holding on. But a person who loves without attachment is free. They do not chase, they do not beg, they do not cling. They give love fully, but they do not make their happiness dependent on another person. If someone stays, they appreciate them. If someone leaves, they let them go with grace. The greatest pain in life comes not from loss itself, but from resistance to loss. A person who cannot let go will always suffer because they are trying to control what is not meant to be controlled. They believe that if they hold on to they can prevent change, prevent endings, prevent life from moving in its natural course. But life does not obey personal desires. People change, circumstances shift, everything is in motion. To resist this is to fight reality itself, and that is a battle no one ever wins. Non-attachment does not mean withdrawal from life. It does not mean rejecting all desires, living without ambition, or refusing to care. It means engaging with life fully, but without addiction to outcomes. It means doing your best, and then surrendering the result. It means enjoying things without fearing their loss. It means appreciating people without trying to possess them. It means walking through life with open hands rather than clenched fists. Many people think happiness comes from getting what they want, but in reality, happiness comes from being free of the need for anything. The person who wants nothing is untouchable. The person who demands nothing cannot be disappointed. The person who clings to nothing cannot be shaken. This does not mean living without purpose. It means living with a purpose that is not tied to external things. A person who is only happy when they succeed will always fear failure. But a person who values effort over results, who focuses on process rather than rewards, will always be at peace. This is why the Stoics prioritized virtue over pleasure. They understood that external pleasures fade, that wealth can disappear, that relationships come and go, but a person who builds their inner world cannot be destroyed by external loss. If they have riches, they use them wisely. If they lose everything, they are still rich in wisdom. If they are loved, they cherish it. If they are alone, they remain complete. They do not live in fear of change, because they have mastered the art of letting go. Letting go is the highest form of power. It is the refusal to be controlled by desires, by fears, by the illusions of permanence. It is the ability to live fully in the present without being trapped by the past or anxious about the future. It is walking through life lightly, with nothing weighing you down, because you do not carry unnecessary attachments. A person who has mastered non-attachment does not suffer over what they cannot control. They do not resent the past. They do not obsess over the future. They accept what comes and release what goes. And in that freedom, they find true happiness. Most people do not suffer because of what happens to them. They suffer because of how tightly they hold on. They attach their happiness to a single person, a single outcome, a single idea of how life should be. And when life inevitably moves in a different direction, they break. But the Stoic does not break. The Stoic bends with the wind, flows with the current, moves with the nature of things. And because of this, they are never truly disturbed. Happiness is not something to be found. It is something that reveals itself when all unnecessary suffering is removed. The desire for control, the fear of loss, the need for validation, these are the chains that keep a person in misery. When they are broken, what remains is peace, and peace is the highest form of wealth a person can possess. Most people go through life believing that peace will come once circumstances are perfect. They wait for a moment when everything aligns, when there is no stress, no disappointment, no uncertainty. They assume happiness is something that arrives once the world outside becomes predictable and comfortable. But this belief sets them up for endless frustration. Life is never predictable. It does not wait for convenience. It does not pause to accommodate personal desires. Challenges arise, plans fall apart, and emotions fluctuate. If a person's peace depends on external stability, they will never truly experience it. The only way to cultivate real serenity is to train the mind to be unshaken by whatever happens. The Stoics understood that peace is not something that just appears. It must be developed through deliberate effort. Just as an untrained body grows weak, an undisciplined mind becomes fragile, reactive, and chaotic. If a person does not learn to direct their thoughts will control them. If they do not strengthen their emotions, they will be ruled by fear, frustration, and anxiety. This is why the Stoics practiced daily exercises, mental techniques designed to sharpen awareness, increase resilience, and strengthen the ability to remain calm under pressure. Without this training, the mind becomes easily disturbed, reacting wildly to every minor inconvenience. But when properly disciplined, the mind becomes a fortress, capable of enduring any storm. One of the most powerful Stoic techniques for achieving this mental discipline is learning how to shift perspective. The way a person interprets an event determines how they feel about it. The same situation can either be seen as a crisis or as an opportunity, depending on the way the mind processes it. A person who views difficulty as unfair will always suffer, but someone who sees challenges as a necessary part of growth will experience a completely different reality. The mind, not the event itself, creates distress. When the mind is trained to see struggles differently, suffering is dramatically reduced. Marcus Aurelius captured this idea in one of the most important Stoic principles. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This means that whatever appears to block progress can actually become the path forward. Instead of resisting problems, a trained mind embraces them as necessary parts of life. This shift in thinking changes everything. A difficult situation that once seemed unbearable transforms into a valuable lesson in patience, endurance, and wisdom. Failure is no longer feared, but seen as a teacher. Rejection is not an attack, but an opportunity for refinement. Every hardship, rather than being an obstacle, becomes fuel for growth. People who see obstacles as unfair remain trapped in frustration. They spend their energy wishing things were different, resenting every inconvenience. They view setbacks as personal injustices rather than as natural parts of life. But those who reframe challenges as opportunities cultivate a different kind of power. They no longer see themselves as victims. They do not waste time resisting reality. They understand that suffering is not caused by events, but by their interpretation of them. The moment they choose to see problems differently, those problems lose their ability to cause unnecessary distress. At the heart of this shift in perspective is a practice known as amor fati, the love of fate. Most people resist what they cannot control. They fight against reality, wishing that things had turned out differently. They cling to frustration over past events. They fear uncertainty about the future, and they struggle against circumstances they cannot change. This resistance is the root of most suffering. The Stoics, however, did not just accept what happened to them. They embraced it fully. They did not merely tolerate adversity, they welcomed it as an essential part of life. To practice amor fati is to trust that everything, both the good and the bad, plays a necessary role in life. Nothing is wasted, and nothing is meaningless. Every difficulty, every failure, every setback contains something valuable. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" a trained mind asks, "How can this serve me?" Instead of resisting fate, it aligns itself with it. There is no demand that life be different, only an acceptance of what is. This perspective brings an immense sense of peace. When a person stops fighting against reality, their energy is no longer consumed by frustration and complaints. They become adaptable, able to adjust to life's events rather than being broken by them. They stop fearing change because they trust that whatever happens is meant to happen. They do not fear loss because they understand that everything is temporary. They do not fear failure because they know that every setback contains a lesson. They stop living in constant fear, regret, and frustration because they no longer demand that life meet their expectations. People who fail to train their minds in this way remain in a constant state of tension. They resist what has already happened, hoping that somehow the past could have been different. They waste energy fearing the future, trying to control things that are beyond their reach. They measure their happiness by external conditions, believing that peace will come once everything is perfect. But perfection never arrives, and so they remain in a state of permanent dissatisfaction. A trained mind, however, does not fall into this trap. It does not seek control over the uncontrollable. It does not depend on the outside world for peace. It recognizes that the only thing that can truly be controlled is perspective. And with this realization, a person gains an incredible sense of freedom. They no longer live in fear of uncertainty. They no longer waste time regretting the past. They no longer panic when things do not go as planned. Instead, they move through life with a steady sense of calm, knowing that every challenge, every unexpected change, every difficult moment is not a threat, but an opportunity. This is the difference between a person who has mastered their mind and a person who is enslaved by it. A person who has trained their perspective does not crumble under pressure. They do not fear discomfort, because they understand that struggle is a part of growth. They do not allow external events to dictate their emotions, because they have learned to control how they interpret those events. They are not weakened by difficulty, because they see difficulty as fuel for strength. They are not at war with life, because they understand that everything, both the good and the bad, serves a purpose. Those who fail to train their perspective remain prisoners of their own minds. They suffer not because life is cruel, but because they resist what they cannot control. They live in a constant state of dissatisfaction, always waiting for things to change before they allow themselves to feel at peace. They do not realize that peace was never about controlling the world. It was always about controlling how they see it. But those who embrace the Stoic discipline of perspective training gain something rare. They no longer live in fear, frustration, or resentment. They no longer feel like victims of circumstances. They see obstacles as teachers. They embrace challenges as part of the process. They understand that nothing in life is inherently good or bad. It is only the mind's interpretation that makes it so. And because they have mastered their ability to control that interpretation, they are free. Mastering the mind is not about reading philosophy or memorizing quotes. It is about a relentless, daily commitment to discipline, training oneself to remain steady, regardless of what happens in the outside world. Without this training, the mind is a fragile thing, easily swayed by emotions, external events, and fleeting desires. Without discipline, it panics when life becomes uncertain. It clings to what is comfortable, and it constantly seeks reassurance from things beyond its control. A mind left untrained is a mind at war with itself. The Stoics did not seek peace by avoiding hardship or controlling the world around them. They found peace by strengthening their inner world to the point that nothing external could shake them. They treated mental resilience like a skill, something to be sharpened, refined, and tested. Just as an athlete conditions their body for endurance, the Stoics conditioned their minds for stability. They did not wait for challenges to arise before preparing themselves. They trained every day so that when hardship inevitably arrived, they were ready. A warrior does not sharpen their sword in the middle of battle. A Stoic does not attempt to cultivate inner peace only when life becomes difficult. The work must be done in advance. A person who does not train their mind is at the mercy of their emotions. They react impulsively, allowing fear, anger, and frustration to dictate their actions. They become slaves to their circumstances, constantly thrown off balance by events beyond their control. The Stoics understood that true freedom is not the ability to control external events, but the ability to remain unshaken by them. This is why they developed practices, exercises designed to strengthen the mind and ensure that it remains steady in all situations. One of the most powerful disciplines was reflection. At the end of each day, the Stoics would review their actions, holding themselves accountable for their thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. They did not excuse their mistakes or allow their ego to protect them from self-examination. They faced their shortcomings with honesty, understanding that awareness is the first step toward mastery. A person who does not reflect on their own actions repeats the same mistakes. They live unconsciously, unaware of their patterns, unable to break free from their weaknesses. But those who practice self-examination sharpen their awareness. They recognize where they have fallen short, they correct their course, and they refine their character. Another essential practice was visualization. Most people hope for the best and fear the worst. The Stoics took a different approach. They prepared for everything. They visualized loss so that if it ever occurred, they would not be caught off guard. They anticipated hardship so that when it arrived, they were already mentally prepared. They practiced responding to insults, betrayal, and failure in their minds before these events ever took place. By doing so, they ensured that no challenge would ever break them. A person who expects everything to go well is easily shaken when it does not. But a person who has already rehearsed adversity is unshakable. Training the mind was not just about mental exercises. It was about action. The Stoics deliberately exposed themselves to discomfort to ensure that they did not grow weak. Seneca, despite his wealth, slept on the floor to remind himself that luxury was not a necessity. Marcus Aurelius, despite his status as emperor, disciplined himself to live simply and without indulgence. They understood that comfort breeds dependency, and dependency weakens the mind. A person who cannot handle discomfort is controlled by their cravings. They seek pleasure over discipline, comfort over resilience, indulgence over restraint. But a person who has trained themselves to endure hardship without complaint is truly free. They do not fear loss because they have already practiced living with nothing. They do not fear pain because they have already embraced discomfort. They do not fear rejection because they have already detached from the need for approval. Modern life has made people mentally soft. The constant pursuit of convenience has weakened resilience, creating a generation that cannot handle inconvenience, uncertainty, or discomfort. Every minor setback is met with frustration. Every delay is treated as an injustice. Every difficult moment is seen as a reason to complain. The more comfortable life becomes, the more fragile the mind grows. People avoid struggle, but in doing so, they also avoid strength. They seek constant entertainment, but in doing so, they lose focus. They indulge in every craving, but in doing so, they weaken their discipline. They refuse to train their minds, and as a result, they remain prisoners to their impulses. But those who embrace discomfort, who challenge themselves daily, who deliberately push their limits, develop an inner fortress that cannot be breached. They do not run from hardship. They seek it out as an opportunity to grow. They do not complain when things are difficult. They view difficulty as training. They do not resist the natural challenges of life. They accept them as necessary conditions for strength. This mindset creates an individual who is unbreakable, not because life is easy, but because they have trained themselves to remain steady, no matter what. Without training, the mind reverts to its default state, reactive, fragile, and easily disturbed. It clings to expectations, panics in uncertainty, and desperately seeks control over things that were never within its power. This is why mental discipline is not something that can be practiced once and forgotten. It must be a lifelong commitment. Just as the body weakens without exercise, so too does the mind without training. Without constant refinement, emotions take over, clarity is lost, and inner peace becomes impossible. But even with a disciplined mind, there is one fundamental truth that cannot be ignored. No amount of training will allow someone to control the world around them. There will always be unexpected challenges, unpredictable people, and circumstances beyond one's reach. Even the strongest mind will struggle if it remains attached to controlling things that are outside of its power. This is why the Stoics emphasized one of their most crucial teachings, the dichotomy of control. People exhaust themselves trying to control things that were never theirs to control. They stress over the opinions of others. They fight against the inevitable changes of life. They cling to circumstances that are slipping through their fingers. This constant struggle leaves them drained, anxious, and frustrated. But those who understand the dichotomy of control see life differently. They do not waste energy on what they cannot change. They do not attempt to control other people, nor do they resist the natural flow of events. Instead, they focus entirely on what is within their power, their own thoughts, actions, and responses. This principle is the foundation of true peace. A person who tries to control everything is constantly at war with reality, but a person who focuses only on what they can control becomes unshakable. The next lesson will explore this principle in depth, why so many people suffer by trying to control the uncontrollable, and how shifting focus to what is truly within one's power leads to an extraordinary sense of freedom. Most people live in a state of constant dissatisfaction, always wanting more, always waiting for something else to make them feel complete. They move through life with a quiet sense of unease, believing that happiness exists somewhere in the future, after the next achievement, after the next milestone, after the next possession. But this pursuit is endless. The moment one desire is fulfilled, another takes its place. The cycle never ends, and in the process, people overlook the very things that already make life rich. The Stoics saw this trap for what it was, a guaranteed way to remain perpetually restless. They knew that fulfillment is not found in chasing more, but in fully appreciating what already exists. Gratitude is not a passive feeling that appears when life is perfect. It is an active discipline, a way of seeing the world that transforms even the most difficult moments into sources of strength. Marcus Aurelius, a man who carried the weight of an empire, practiced gratitude not because his life was easy, but because he understood that without it, even the greatest achievements would feel empty. Gratitude is the antidote to discontent. When a person trains themselves to acknowledge what they already have, the endless craving for more begins to lose its power. Instead of focusing on what is missing, the mind shifts to what is present. The air in the lungs, the warmth of the sun, the ability to think, move, and experience the world, things that are often taken for granted, become sources of quiet joy. This shift in focus does not mean ignoring ambition or ceasing to strive for excellence. It means that one's peace is no longer dependent on external gains. A person can still pursue goals, but they no longer operate from a place of lack. They do not believe they need something more to be happy, because they have already cultivated a sense of contentment within. The power of gratitude is most evident in hardship. When everything is going well, it is easy to feel grateful. But true Stoic gratitude is tested when life becomes difficult. A person who can find appreciation, even in suffering, has mastered one of the greatest mental disciplines. They do not deny pain or pretend that struggles do not exist, but they reframe them in a way that gives them strength instead of taking it away. Marcus Aurelius, facing wars, betrayal, and the constant weight of responsibility, did not crumble under pressure because he trained his mind to find something valuable in every situation. He understood that even suffering could be a teacher, that even misfortune could be an opportunity to grow. Gratitude is a skill, not an emotion. It is something that must be practiced deliberately, not something that should be expected to appear on its own. Just as a muscle weakens when it is not used, the ability to see the good in life diminishes when it is not cultivated. This is why the Stoics made gratitude a daily practice. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, constantly reminded himself to appreciate what he had. He did not write these reflections for others. He wrote them for himself, to train his mind, to ensure that he would not fall into the trap of entitlement or resentment. He understood that without gratitude, even the greatest victories would feel hollow. One of the most effective ways to practice gratitude is through journaling. The Stoics would take time to reflect on the day, noting what went well, what they were thankful for, and what lessons could be extracted from their experiences. This practice rewires the brain, shifting focus away from problems and toward appreciation. A person who does not reflect on their blessings takes them for granted. But someone who consistently acknowledges the good in their life develops an unshakable sense of inner peace. Another powerful method is shifting perspective. Most frustrations arise from comparing what is to what could be. People become dissatisfied because their expectations do not align with reality. But when perspective changes, so does everything else. A person who complains about their job fails to recognize that millions of people would trade places with them in an instant. Someone who is frustrated about minor inconveniences forgets that they still have their health, their freedom, and the ability to improve their situation. The fastest way to change how something feels is to change how it is viewed. When a person chooses to see the value in what they already have, their experience of life is transformed. Gratitude also acts as a shield against negativity. In a world that constantly bombards people with reasons to feel dissatisfied, gratitude becomes an act of defiance. Advertisements, social media, and societal expectations all reinforce the idea that happiness is found in more success, more possessions, more validation. But the Stoic sees through this illusion. They understand that lasting contentment is not found in accumulating things, but in appreciating what already exists. They do not need external circumstances to be perfect in order to be at peace. They cultivate an inner state of gratitude that is independent of what happens around them. There is also a deep connection between gratitude and resilience. A person who trains themselves to find something to be thankful for in every situation becomes incredibly difficult to break. They do not crumble when things go wrong because they have trained themselves to extract value from every experience. Even failure, rejection, and hardship become opportunities for growth. They do not see misfortune as an obstacle, but as another chance to strengthen their character. This mindset allows them to navigate life with a sense of calm, knowing that nothing can truly take away their peace unless they allow it to. Gratitude is not about ignoring problems or pretending that life is perfect. It is about choosing to focus on what is good, even when things are difficult. It is about recognizing that no matter what is happening, there is always something to appreciate. This mindset does not just make life more enjoyable, it makes a person stronger. When gratitude becomes a way of life, external circumstances lose their power to dictate emotions. A person no longer waits for happiness to come from the outside. They generate it from within. Most people spend their lives running from discomfort, believing that happiness is found in ease, luxury, and uninterrupted pleasure. But if that were true, then those who have the most comfort would be the happiest. Yet, they aren't. Instead, they are often the most restless, dissatisfied, and fragile. The more someone avoids discomfort, the more intolerable even the smallest inconvenience becomes. This is where the ancient Stoics took a radically different approach. Instead of fearing hardship, they welcomed it. Instead of clinging to comfort, they deliberately introduced controlled discomfort into their lives, because they understood a truth that most people today have forgotten. Comfort weakens, while challenge strengthens. Seneca, one of Stoicism's greatest thinkers, practiced voluntary discomfort to ensure that he would never become dependent on luxury. He slept on the floor, ate the simplest meals, and wore rough clothing, not out of necessity, but as a test. He wanted to train himself to endure hardship before life forced it upon him. If he could find peace in discomfort, then no misfortune could ever truly harm him. This was not self-punishment. It was self-liberation. The more he stripped himself of unnecessary indulgences, the more he realized that happiness had nothing to do with external conditions and everything to do with inner mastery. The modern world teaches the opposite. It convinces people that happiness is found in eliminating struggle, in making everything as easy and comfortable as possible. But this pursuit leads to weakness, not fulfillment. The mind, like the body, grows fragile when it is not tested. When someone spends their life avoiding discomfort, their tolerance for hardship shrinks. Even minor inconveniences begin to feel unbearable. But when a person deliberately steps into discomfort, something shifts. Their mind becomes sharper, their resilience deepens, and their confidence grows. Not because their life has gotten easier, but because they have gotten stronger. Strength is not built in safety. A muscle that is never used withers away. A mind that is never challenged becomes dull. People who have never experienced difficulty are the first to break when adversity strikes. But those who have trained themselves to endure discomfort develop an unshakable core. They do not panic when hardship arrives because they have already faced it on their own terms. This is the essence of voluntary discomfort. It is not about suffering for the sake of suffering, but about training the mind to detach from the need for constant ease. One of the most powerful effects of this practice is how it rewires the way a person experiences pleasure. When someone indulges in luxury all the time, it ceases to feel special. It becomes normal, expected, and eventually unfulfilling. But when a person regularly deprives themselves of excess, they gain a new appreciation for the simplest joys. A basic meal tastes extraordinary after a fast. A soft bed feels luxurious after a night on the floor. Comfort is no longer something taken for granted, but something deeply valued. This shift in perspective restores the ability to experience genuine gratitude, a skill that is increasingly rare in a world obsessed with more. Voluntary discomfort also strengthens discipline. Most failures in life do not come from a lack of talent or intelligence, but from a lack of self-control. People struggle to resist temptation, to stay focused, to follow through on their commitments, not because they are incapable, but because they have not trained their willpower. Every time a person willingly chooses discomfort, they sharpen their discipline. They prove to themselves that they can endure, that they are not controlled by impulses, that their mind is stronger than their cravings. This ability to delay gratification is one of the most valuable skills a person can develop, and it spills over into every area of life, from health and career to relationships and personal growth. Beyond discipline, voluntary discomfort shatters fear. Most people are held back in life, not by real obstacles, but by their fear of them. They avoid challenges, risks, and opportunities because they believe they are not strong enough to handle them. But this belief is only true for those who never push themselves. The moment someone proves to themselves that they can endure discomfort, their fears lose their grip. They become bolder, more willing to step into the unknown, because they no longer see hardship as something to be feared, but as something to be mastered. Throughout history, the most resilient individuals have been those who embraced hardship instead of avoiding it. The Spartans trained their warriors in brutal conditions so that real battles would feel easy by comparison. Buddhist monks practiced detachment by voluntarily giving up material pleasures, training their minds to find peace in simplicity. Elite athletes push their bodies to the limit, enduring pain and exhaustion so they can reach levels of performance that seem impossible to the average person. The pattern is the same. Those who expose themselves to controlled hardship become strong. Those who avoid it become weak. There is also a direct link between voluntary discomfort and true happiness. Modern society promotes the illusion that happiness is found in comfort, but the happiest people are not those who have the easiest lives. They are the ones who have learned to endure difficulty without being broken by it. When someone repeatedly proves to themselves that they can handle discomfort, they develop an internal sense of security. They no longer live in fear of losing their comforts, because they have already experienced life without them and emerged stronger. This self-sufficiency is the foundation of lasting contentment. The practical applications of voluntary discomfort are limitless. If someone struggles with self-discipline, they can practice fasting, cold exposure, or cutting out unnecessary luxuries. If they fear rejection, they can deliberately put themselves in situations where they must face it. If they hesitate to take risks, they can start by embracing small, controlled hardships that expand their tolerance for uncertainty. Every deliberate act of discomfort is a step toward greater resilience, greater freedom, and greater happiness. Consistency is the key to making this practice effective. A single difficult experience does not build strength. Resilience is forged through repeated exposure, through a daily habit of stepping outside the comfort zone. The Stoics did not occasionally test their endurance. They made it a way of life. They understood that the world is unpredictable, that suffering is inevitable, and that the only way to face it with dignity is to be prepared. This preparation is what separates those who crumble under pressure from those who rise above it. Life will test everyone at some point, through loss, failure, hardship, and pain. The question is not whether these challenges will come, but whether a person will be ready for them. Someone who has spent their life avoiding discomfort will be shattered by it. But someone who has trained themselves to embrace it will meet it with calm, knowing they have already faced worse and survived. The next step in mastering this mindset is understanding that resilience alone is not enough. Strength must be paired with perspective. A person who has built toughness but lacks wisdom will still be at the mercy of external events. True inner peace comes not just from enduring hardship, but from interpreting it correctly. This is where the Stoic practice of shifting perception comes into play. The next section will explore how the mind can turn even the worst situations into opportunities, how perspective shapes reality, and why mastering one's interpretation of events is the ultimate key to unshakable peace. Chaos is unavoidable. Life will throw storms your way, some expected, others blindsiding you when you least anticipate them. People will betray you. Plans will collapse. Moments of peace will be shattered by sudden waves of uncertainty, conflict, or loss. The world does not promise order, nor does it bend itself to your convenience. Most people react to this unpredictability with frustration, anxiety, and panic. They fight against reality, hoping that life will finally grant them stability, that the chaos will settle, that the world will stop testing them. But it never does. And so, they remain in a constant state of turmoil, allowing every disruption to dictate their inner state. The Stoics, however, mastered a different approach. They understood that the only true control anyone has is over their own mind. External events are unstable, unpredictable, and often brutal, but the mind, if trained properly, can remain untouched by them. This is the essence of remaining calm amidst chaos. It is not about controlling the outside world, but about controlling how you interpret and respond to it. It is about becoming the eye of the storm, untouched by the violent winds around you. The chaos may rage on, but it does not have to disturb your inner stillness. This ability to stay composed in difficult situations is not an inborn trait. It is a skill, and like any skill, it can be developed through deliberate practice. The first step is to recognize that panic is always optional. People believe that they are forced into stress, that anxiety is an automatic reaction to difficult events. But this is not true. Panic is not the situation itself. It is your interpretation of the situation. When you face a setback, a rejection, a financial crisis, or an unexpected loss, your initial emotional reaction is a result of years of untrained thinking. Your mind instinctively treats every difficulty as a crisis, triggering fear and resistance. But just because this reaction is automatic does not mean it is correct. The ability to stay calm starts with a single realization. You are not your emotions. Just because fear arises does not mean you have to obey it. Just because anger flares up does not mean you have to act on it. Most people are ruled by their emotions, reacting to them without question. They let frustration, stress, and worry consume them, assuming these responses are inevitable. But the Stoics understood that emotions are merely signals, not commands. You may feel fear, but you do not have to submit to it. You may feel anger, but you do not have to let it drive you. The moment you separate yourself from your emotions, you reclaim control. One of the most powerful exercises for maintaining composure in chaos is the practice of observing your thoughts without engaging with them. When something upsetting happens, the mind races with worst-case scenarios, amplifying the problem and dragging you into unnecessary suffering. But if you take a step back and simply watch these thoughts instead of believing them, their power over you weakens. Marcus Aurelius frequently reminded himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Instead of being lost in frustration or fear, he trained himself to view his own mind as an observer. He watched his impulses rise, but he did not act on them. He allowed thoughts to pass without latching onto them. This detachment is what allowed him to remain calm, even in moments of extreme crisis. Another essential practice is slowing down before responding. Most emotional chaos comes not from external events, but from impulsive reactions. Something happens, and without thinking, you lash out, overreact, or allow stress to consume you. But if you insert a moment of stillness between stimulus and response, you create space for wisdom. Instead of being pulled by impulse, you regain control. When faced with chaos, ask yourself, will reacting emotionally improve this situation? Almost always, the answer is no. Almost always, a measured response is the best response. Perspective is also a powerful tool for maintaining calm. The mind has a habit of magnifying problems, making them seem larger and more devastating than they actually are. But the Stoics trained themselves to zoom out. They practiced looking at difficulties from a wider lens. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that every event is small in the grand scheme of time. Seneca advised imagining how an issue would appear a year from now, 5 years from now, or at the end of one's life. Most of the problems that feel unbearable in the moment will barely matter in hindsight. By deliberately shifting perspective, you strip chaos of its power. Accepting the impermanence of all things also plays a crucial role in staying calm. Most suffering comes from attachment, the belief that things should remain as they are, that nothing should change, that life should be predictable. But life is in constant motion. Change is inevitable, and clinging to stability only leads to disappointment. The Stoics practiced amor fati, love of fate. They did not just accept life's unpredictability. They embraced it. They treated every event, even misfortune, as something to be used, not resisted. When faced with chaos, instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" they asked, "How can I use this?" This mindset eliminates the frustration that comes from expecting life to be easy. Physical resilience also strengthens mental resilience. The way you treat your body directly affects how you handle stress. Seneca recommended exposing oneself to controlled discomfort, cold showers, fasting, physical exertion, not just for health benefits, but as training for adversity. If you voluntarily endure small hardships, unexpected difficulties feel less overwhelming. A body trained in discomfort houses a mind that does not crumble under stress. Another crucial aspect of staying calm is focusing only on what is within your control. Most anxiety comes from trying to control the uncontrollable, other people's opinions, the outcome of events, the past, or the future. But worrying about these things is wasted energy. The Stoics mastered the art of letting go. They focused only on their own actions, thoughts, and choices, understanding that everything else was outside their command. This mindset eliminates a massive amount of unnecessary stress. Rituals also play a role in emotional stability. Having a structured morning and evening routine creates a sense of control amidst external chaos. The Stoics practiced journaling, reflecting on their thoughts, and mentally preparing for the day ahead. A morning practice of reviewing potential challenges makes difficulties feel less surprising, while an evening practice of reviewing the day's events allows the mind to release tension before sleep. These simple habits build an internal sense of order, even when the outside world is chaotic. Mastering calmness is not about never feeling emotions. It is about not being ruled by them. It is about training the mind to remain still, even when everything around you is shaking. It is about shifting from reactivity to control, from resistance to acceptance, from panic to clarity. This level of composure is not developed overnight, but through consistent practice. Each moment of frustration is an opportunity to train. Each instance of stress is a test. The more you practice stepping back, detaching from emotions, and shifting perspective, the stronger your inner calm becomes. The ability to remain steady in chaos is one of the most powerful skills anyone can develop. It protects you from being controlled by circumstances. It allows you to navigate life's storms without being thrown off course. It makes you unshakable, but calmness alone is not enough. True resilience requires more than just staying composed. It requires turning every challenge into an opportunity for growth. Discipline is often misunderstood. People see it as restriction, as limitation, as a rigid force that suffocates joy. They believe that happiness comes from absolute freedom, doing whatever they want, whenever they want, with no rules, no structure, and no constraints. But those who have lived this way for long enough eventually come to a painful realization. Unrestricted freedom leads to chaos. A life without discipline does not bring joy. It breeds disorder, regret, and emptiness. The very thing people try to avoid, restriction, ends up being the only path to true fulfillment. The paradox is this: only through self-mastery can a person experience real happiness. Most people chase pleasure, mistaking it for happiness. They indulge in distractions, impulsively satisfying desires, assuming that the absence of rules means the presence of joy. But fleeting pleasures never lead to lasting satisfaction. They create a hunger that never ends, a craving that grows stronger the more it is indulged. The lack of self-control does not bring freedom. It brings enslavement to impulses. The person who eats whatever they want, spends recklessly, procrastinates endlessly, and avoids discipline is not free. They are at the mercy of their desires. They are dragged around by their emotions, their habits, and their weaknesses. True freedom does not mean the absence of rules. It means the presence of self-command. The Stoics understood this deeply. They knew that a person who cannot govern themselves will always be ruled by something else, by external circumstances, by emotions, by temptations. The real source of happiness is self-discipline because it creates the conditions for a meaningful life. Without it, nothing of value is built. Without it, chaos consumes everything. Self-discipline is not a burden. It is the foundation of self-respect. Every time a person follows through on what they said they would do, they strengthen their sense of identity. They prove to themselves that they are capable, that they are not weak, that they have control over their actions. This self-trust is what creates an unshakable inner peace. A person who knows they can rely on themselves moves through life with a quiet confidence that cannot be given by external validation. The practice of self-discipline extends to every part of life. It is in the ability to control thoughts, to not be consumed by negativity, to resist the pull of pointless distractions. It is in the way a person manages their time, prioritizing long-term fulfillment over short-term gratification. It is in the strength to face difficulties with composure, to not be broken by setbacks, to keep moving forward even when motivation disappears. Self-discipline is what separates those who only dream from those who achieve. It is the invisible force behind all great accomplishments, the quiet power that builds an unbreakable mind. The reason discipline leads to happiness is that it removes the guilt, regret, and disappointment that come from a lack of self-control. When a person neglects their responsibilities, wastes their time, and succumbs to every impulse, they may experience momentary pleasure, but it is always followed by a deeper dissatisfaction. They feel weak. They feel lost. They feel out of control. But when a person commits to discipline, when they set rules for themselves and follow them, they gain something far greater than pleasure. They gain pride. This is why the most accomplished individuals in history have all emphasized discipline as the key to a fulfilled life. The Stoics, from Marcus Aurelius to Epictetus, understood that happiness is not found in indulgence, but in self-mastery. Marcus Aurelius, as the most powerful man in the world, did not allow himself to become soft or complacent. He woke early, trained his body and mind, wrote in his journal, and held himself to the highest standard. He did not do this because he enjoyed suffering, but because he understood that the highest form of joy comes from a disciplined life. Discipline is not about punishment, it is about structure. It is the architect of freedom. The musician who practices daily earns the freedom to play beautifully. The athlete who trains relentlessly gains the freedom to move with power and grace. The writer who dedicates themselves to their craft achieves the freedom to express ideas with clarity. In every field, discipline is what unlocks the highest level of excellence. Without it, nothing of value is built. Most people resist discipline because they associate it with deprivation. They think it means giving up pleasure, making life dull and rigid. But this is only true for those who have never experienced the rewards of self-control. The truth is that a disciplined life is richer, deeper, and more meaningful than one driven by impulse. The person who wakes up early, exercises consistently, sharpens their mind, and lives with purpose, experiences a level of happiness that no amount of indulgence can match. The path of self-discipline is not always easy. There will be resistance. The mind will crave comfort. The body will seek ease. But overcoming this resistance is what strengthens the spirit. Every time a person pushes through discomfort, they expand their capacity for greatness. They become stronger, not just physically, but mentally. They develop the ability to endure hardship, to persist through challenges, to stay focused even when results are not immediate. The key to making discipline sustainable is to connect it with purpose. When a person understands why they are doing something, when they see the long-term benefit, discipline stops feeling like a sacrifice and starts feeling like an investment. The person who trains their body does not do it to suffer. They do it to be strong, to be capable, to live with vitality. The person who disciplines their mind does not do it to suppress themselves. They do it to gain clarity, to develop wisdom, to build a life that aligns with their highest values. Self-discipline is not about perfection. It is about consistency. It is not about never making mistakes, but about never letting mistakes define you. It is about learning to recover quickly, to not let a single failure turn into permanent defeat. The most disciplined people are not those who never fall. They are those who rise every time they do. The paradox of discipline is that while it may seem limiting at first, it is actually the greatest source of freedom. The person who lacks discipline is a slave to their impulses. They are controlled by their cravings, their emotions, their distractions. But the person who masters themselves is truly free. They are not pulled in 1,000 directions by fleeting desires. They are not trapped by procrastination, by addiction, by weakness. They walk through life with a sense of control, with a deep inner peace that is unshaken by external chaos. The happiness of self-mastery is the kind of happiness that lasts. It is not dependent on circumstances. It does not fade when pleasure wears off. It is built on the solid foundation of knowing that you have full command over your own life. This is why the Stoics held discipline in such high regard. It was not about suffering. It was about building a life worth living, a mind worth trusting, and a strength that could carry you through anything. But self-discipline alone is not enough. It must be paired with wisdom, with the ability to adapt, to know when to push forward and when to rest, when to hold firm and when to let go. There is no shortage of negativity in the world. Every day people are bombarded with distractions, fear and doubt from countless directions. The news thrives on crisis. Social media amplifies outrage. Conversations are often filled with complaints rather than solutions. Without a strong mental filter, the mind becomes a dumping ground for everything toxic, absorbing stress, anxiety, and frustration that do not belong to it. But those who have mastered their mindset know this: you do not have to accept every thought, every emotion, or every influence that comes your way. You have the power to reject what weakens you and focus only on what strengthens you. Most people allow their environment to dictate their state of mind. If the world is chaotic, they feel chaotic. If people around them are negative, they become negative. If the circumstances are unfair, they drown in self-pity. But this is a passive way to live, one that hands over control of the mind to external forces. The Stoics understood that the world is unpredictable, people are flawed, and life will always have challenges, but none of that should ever determine your inner state. Strength is not found in avoiding hardship, but in choosing your response to it. The way you filter reality decides whether you live in peace or in constant turmoil. Not all problems belong to you. Not all negativity is yours to carry. Yet many people willingly pick up burdens that are not theirs, taking responsibility for other people's moods, worrying about opinions that do not matter, dwelling on things they cannot change. This mental clutter drains energy, leaving little room for clarity and focus. The key to an unshakable mindset is recognizing what deserves attention and what should be discarded. When a negative thought or influence enters the mind, there must be a conscious choice. Does this serve me, or does it weaken me? If it weakens, it is not worth holding on to. Mental discipline begins with awareness. The untrained mind operates on autopilot, absorbing whatever it encounters without question. It takes in every complaint, every insult, every piece of bad news as if it were its own. But a strong mind observes before it accepts. It does not react impulsively, it evaluates. It understands that not every thought deserves belief, not every situation deserves a reaction, and not every battle deserves to be fought. True strength is not in overpowering others, but in mastering the ability to remain unaffected by what does not serve you. Negativity is contagious. It spreads through words, emotions, and energy. Spend enough time around pessimism, and it will color your perspective. Engage in gossip, and it will train your mind to focus on faults rather than solutions. Dwell on problems, and they will grow larger in your mind. But just as negativity spreads, so does discipline. A person who trains their mind to stay composed in the face of negativity creates a force field that repels unnecessary drama and stress. They are the calm in the storm, the unmovable presence in chaos, the quiet strength in a world addicted to noise. Filtering negativity does not mean ignoring reality. It means choosing where to direct attention. Most suffering comes not from events themselves, but from the mental weight placed upon them. Two people can experience the same hardship. One crumbles under the pressure, the other emerges stronger. The difference is mindset. The weak mind focuses on what is unfair, what is out of its control, what is wrong. The strong mind focuses on solutions, on action, on what can be improved. The first mindset leads to helplessness. The second leads to power. What you consume mentally is just as important as what you consume physically. Junk food poisons the body, and mental junk poisons the mind. Complaints, distractions, and unnecessary arguments serve no purpose other than to drain focus and weaken resolve. Just as a disciplined person does not eat whatever is placed in front of them, a disciplined mind does not entertain every thought or engage in every conversation. Strength is found in selective focus, choosing to consume ideas that elevate rather than degrade, that inspire rather than exhaust. Many people make the mistake of thinking that protecting energy means isolation. They believe they must cut off everyone, avoid all conflict, and escape reality. But real strength is not found in running away. It's found in standing firm without being shaken. It's the ability to remain in the middle of negativity without letting it enter the mind. It's the power to hear an insult and feel no anger, to witness chaos and feel no panic, to face uncertainty and feel no fear. This level of control is not natural. It is built through constant awareness and deliberate training. Training the mind begins with mastering reactions. The untrained mind reacts impulsively, pulled in all directions by emotions. If someone is rude, it takes offense. If something goes wrong, it panics. If a challenge appears, it complains. But the trained mind pauses before reacting. It understands that every response is a choice. It learns to delay emotion, to see situations objectively before allowing feelings to take over. This is not suppression. It is mastery. It is the ability to observe thoughts without being controlled by them, to experience emotions without being overwhelmed by them. The strongest people are not those who are never tested, but those who remain unshaken despite endless tests. They do not expect life to be easy. They expect themselves to be strong. They do not wait for circumstances to improve. They improve themselves. They do not rely on the world to give them peace. They cultivate it within themselves. This is what makes them unstoppable. Maintaining an unshakable mindset requires daily practice. Just as physical strength fades without consistent training, mental resilience weakens without constant reinforcement. The world will not stop throwing challenges. People will not stop being difficult. Life will not stop being unpredictable. But none of these things are problems for those who have trained their minds. They meet every difficulty with composure, every obstacle with patience, every hardship with an unbreakable will. The moment you decide to take control of your mindset, everything changes. You stop being a victim of negativity and start becoming a master of perspective. You no longer absorb stress, you deflect it. You no longer react impulsively. You respond with purpose. You no longer seek happiness in external conditions. You build it from within. This is the true power of an unshakable mind. And as this strength grows, a new realization emerges. The world does not dictate inner peace. Nothing external has the power to take what is guarded with discipline. No amount of negativity can penetrate a mind that refuses to be controlled by anything other than its own will. This is where real happiness begins, not in controlling the world, but in mastering the self. There comes a moment when the noise of the world fades, and you are left alone with your own thoughts. For many, this is an unbearable feeling, the absence of external validation, the silence where distractions used to be, the realization that no one is watching, no one is reacting. This is what unsettles them. They have built their lives around the presence of others, around the approval of the crowd, around the comfort of company. But those who have mastered solitude know something different. Being alone is not a weakness. It is a strength. It is the foundation of true clarity, the proving ground for self-sufficiency, the source of an unshakable inner world that does not crumble when left in silence. Most people do not fear solitude itself. They fear what it reveals. They fear confronting their own thoughts without distraction, facing their true selves without performance, seeing their insecurities without a mask to hide behind. This is why they fill every empty space with noise. They constantly check their phones, seek conversations, lose themselves in entertainment, surround themselves with people, not because they crave connection, but because they fear what they might find if they are left alone. But avoidance is not strength. A person who cannot stand to be alone has not yet built a mind they can live with. They have outsourced their happiness, made their sense of self dependent on others, handed over their inner peace to forces beyond their control. And anything dependent on the external is fragile. The Stoics understood that solitude is not isolation. It is not about cutting people off or withdrawing from the world. It is about developing the ability to be complete within oneself. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, warned against the dangers of relying too much on the crowd. He wrote that a person who is always surrounded by others, always chasing social interaction, is never truly in control of their own mind. To him, solitude was not loneliness, but an opportunity to think clearly, to strip away illusions, to refine the self without the influence of external noise. Epictetus echoed this, teaching that true freedom comes from not being enslaved to the presence or absence of others. The person who enjoys their own company, who does not need an audience to feel valued, who does not fear the quiet moments of life, this person is truly free. Most people believe that happiness comes from relationships, from being loved, from feeling connected to others. But this is a dangerous belief, because if happiness depends on others, what happens when they leave? What happens when they change? What happens when they disappoint? The reality is, no matter how deep a connection may seem, every external relationship carries the risk of loss. People move on. They grow apart. They fail to meet expectations. If happiness is built on external attachment, then suffering becomes inevitable. But the person who finds strength in solitude is never truly alone, because their peace does not come from others. It comes from within. Learning to enjoy your own company requires a shift in mindset. Instead of seeing solitude as something to escape, it must be embraced as an opportunity to think without influence, to cultivate inner stillness, to develop a mind that does not crave distraction. Most people cannot sit in silence for even a few minutes without feeling restless. They need music, conversations, notifications, anything to keep them from facing the raw presence of their own thoughts. But those who train themselves to be comfortable in solitude gain something powerful: self-possession. The ability to sit in a room alone with nothing but their own mind and feel at peace. A person who cannot be alone is a person who is never truly in control. They are at the mercy of others, seeking approval, fearing rejection, needing attention to feel whole. But a person who has mastered solitude is untouchable. They do not seek validation because they validate themselves. They do not fear being ignored because they do not require recognition. They do not crumble in the absence of company because they are whole on their own. This is not arrogance, it is independence. It is the realization that true strength is not found in attachment, but in self-sufficiency. There is a misconception that solitude leads to emptiness, but the truth is, it leads to fullness. When external noise is removed, when distractions are stripped away, what remains is space. Space to think, space to reflect, space to grow. Some of the greatest minds in history, from the Stoics to modern thinkers, understood that breakthroughs happen in solitude. The deepest insights, the clearest decisions, the most profound realizations. They do not come from being surrounded by people. They come in moments of quiet, when the mind is free to process, to understand, to see the world as it truly is. But solitude is not just about thought. It is about strength. It is about proving to yourself that you are enough. Most people seek relationships out of need rather than desire. They do not pursue connections because they genuinely enjoy them, but because they fear being alone. They do not love, they cling. They do not bond, they depend. And dependence always leads to weakness. The Stoics believed that relationships should be chosen, not needed. That love should be given freely, not as a means to escape oneself. That true connection happens not when two incomplete people try to fill each other's gaps, but when two whole individuals share their completeness. A person who has mastered solitude does not enter relationships out of desperation. They do not look for others to complete them. They are already complete. And because of this, they bring strength, not neediness. Stability, not insecurity. Clarity, not confusion. They are not afraid of losing people because they are never truly lost. Wherever they go, they bring themselves, and that is always enough. Most people never experience this level of self-sufficiency because they have never trained for it. They have never tested what it feels like to be alone, without distraction, without external affirmation. But solitude is like a muscle. It must be exercised to become strong. And the first step is facing the discomfort, sitting with the silence, allowing the restless mind to settle. Over time, what once felt unbearable becomes a source of power. What once seemed like emptiness transforms into a foundation, and what once was feared becomes a source of unshakable peace. In the end, solitude is not about removing others. It is about discovering yourself. It is about knowing that you are your own foundation, your own source of happiness, your own anchor in a world of uncertainty. It is about reaching a place where you can walk through life without fear of being alone, because you have already found everything you need within. And when this happens, something incredible occurs. The world no longer has control over your happiness, because your happiness is no longer something that can be given or taken away. It is something you carry, unbreakable, wherever you go. There is no escaping suffering. Every person, no matter how careful, disciplined, or fortunate, will eventually face pain. It will come in different forms: betrayal, loss, failure, humiliation. And when it does, most people try to resist it, to fight it, to escape it. But those who understand the deeper nature of suffering know that it is not something to be avoided. It is something to be transformed. It is the raw material from which strength is built, the pressure that forges resilience, the darkness that reveals a deeper light. Pain itself is neutral. It is neither good nor bad. What determines its effect is how it is used. Those who reject it, who wallow in it, who allow it to define them, remain broken. But those who embrace it, who study it, who learn from it, these people emerge from suffering stronger than before. There is a hidden power in hardship. Most people never access it because they are too focused on the immediate discomfort. They see suffering as an obstacle rather than an opportunity. They feel wronged. They feel victimized. They feel that life is unfair. But fairness has never been the rule of existence. Life does not guarantee ease. It does not promise justice. It does not operate according to personal expectations. The Stoics understood this. They did not waste energy resisting what had already happened. They did not indulge in self-pity. They did not ask why life was cruel. Instead, they asked a different question. How can this be used? How can this pain be turned into wisdom? How can this difficulty shape a mind that is unbreakable? Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic thinkers, faced betrayal from those closest to him. He endured the loss of children, the weight of ruling an empire, the burden of constant war. And yet he wrote that misfortune is not something to curse. It is something to train with. Pain is the fire that tempers the mind. Hardships are exercises in strength. He did not see suffering as punishment. He saw it as the very thing that could refine a person into something greater. This is the essence of emotional alchemy, taking something painful and turning it into power. Most people let suffering turn them bitter. They build resentment, they lose trust, they close themselves off. They let pain harden them in the worst way, by making them cold, fearful, and defensive. But true strength is not found in shutting down. It is found in remaining open, in learning from suffering, in allowing hardship to deepen one's understanding of life rather than destroy it. The person who masters emotional alchemy does not reject suffering. They welcome it as a teacher. Every betrayal teaches them who to trust. Every failure teaches them what to refine. Every loss teaches them the value of presence. They do not waste pain. They extract every lesson from it, refining themselves in the process. There is a choice in suffering. Most never realize they have it. They believe that pain dictates their reaction, that if something bad happens, they must feel bad. But this is not true. Pain is a fact, but suffering is a choice. The event itself is neutral. It is the meaning assigned to it that determines its effect. This is why two people can experience the same hardship, but respond in completely different ways. One allows it to destroy them. The other uses it as fuel. One sees it as the end. The other sees it as the beginning. The difference is not in what happens, but in how it is interpreted. And interpretation is always within control. The Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, the visualization of potential misfortunes, not because they were pessimistic, but because they understood that preparation turns suffering into strategy. If a person expects ease and is met with hardship, they are shattered. But if a person has already faced hardship in the mind, they are unshaken when it arrives. This is one of the greatest tools of emotional alchemy, reframing suffering before it even happens. Instead of dreading difficulty, they train for it. Instead of fearing loss, they anticipate it. This does not mean they become numb. It means they become unbreakable. When pain strikes, the mind searches for meaning. Most allow it to find weakness. They allow their suffering to convince them that they are unlucky, that they are victims, that life is against them. But this is a flawed interpretation. The truth is, suffering is neither personal nor targeted. It is simply a part of existence. Those who grasp this do not waste time asking why they were chosen for hardship. They understand that everyone will suffer, that no one is exempt, and that the real question is not why, but how. How will this be used? How will this shape me? How will I ensure that this suffering does not go to waste? There is no way to eliminate pain from life, but there is a way to use it. The greatest minds, the strongest spirits, the most resilient people in history, they were not formed in comfort. They were built in struggle. The weak are broken by difficulty. The strong are built by it. Those who complain about suffering remain trapped by it. Those who embrace it as a tool rise above it. There is a difference between feeling pain and being defeated by it. One is inevitable. The other is a decision. The art of emotional alchemy is in choosing not just to endure suffering, but to transform it into something powerful. When life takes something away, it is an opportunity to rebuild stronger. When a person is betrayed, it is a lesson in discernment. When a goal is lost, it is a test of resilience. When something painful happens, it is an invitation to grow. The weak see suffering as an enemy. The wise see it as an ally. The weak avoid it. The wise train with it. And in the end, it is not those who have had the easiest lives who are the strongest. It is those who have taken their suffering and forged it into wisdom. Pain will come. This is unavoidable. But the question remains, what will be done with it? The mind is an alchemist. It can take suffering and turn it into despair, or it can take suffering and turn it into strength. Those who master this choice master life itself. Because no matter what happens, no matter what is lost, no matter what is taken, nothing can touch a mind that has learned to transform pain into power. Pain and suffering are not the only forces that deceive the mind. Pleasure, too, can be a powerful illusion. It presents itself as a path to happiness, promising fulfillment, satisfaction, and relief. It seduces with comfort, with indulgence, with the allure of an easier life. But beneath its surface, pleasure is not always what it seems. It is fleeting. It demands more and more without ever truly satisfying. It creates dependency. And in its most dangerous form, it turns a person into its prisoner, chasing the next moment of gratification, mistaking momentary highs for something deeper, something lasting. Pleasure is not the enemy, but it is also not the answer. This is where most people get trapped. They seek happiness in external comforts, in material gain, in fleeting moments of euphoria. They believe that if they could just have a little more money, a little more excitement, a little more entertainment, then they would finally be content. But pleasure, by its very nature, does not last. The thrill fades. The novelty wears off. The desire renews itself. What was once exciting becomes ordinary. What once satisfied becomes insufficient. And so the chase continues endlessly, without ever leading to real fulfillment. This is what the Stoics warned against. Not pleasure itself, but the illusion that pleasure is happiness. There is nothing wrong with enjoying life, with appreciating comfort, with experiencing joy. But when these things become a requirement for contentment, when they dictate emotional stability, when they become chains rather than gifts, they lead not to freedom, but to dependence. And dependence in any form is the opposite of peace. The mind adapts to pleasure. This is what makes it so dangerous. A person who gains something new, a promotion, a luxury, an exciting experience, feels a rush of satisfaction, but soon that feeling fades. What was once a source of happiness becomes the new normal, and then another source must be found. Another pursuit must begin. This endless cycle is known as the hedonistic treadmill, the phenomenon where a person keeps running toward pleasure, yet never truly arrives at contentment. No matter how much they acquire, no matter how much they indulge, they remain at the same level of happiness. Pleasure is a moving target, and those who chase it will always be one step behind. This is why the Stoics did not build their philosophy on external enjoyment. They did not reject pleasure, but they did not depend on it. They understood that anything external is temporary. That which is given can be taken away. That which brings joy today may bring emptiness tomorrow. The only true source of happiness must come from within, not from fleeting pleasures, not from external conditions, but from something unshakable, something that does not fade, something that cannot be lost. Seneca, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, was a man of immense wealth and privilege. He had access to all the pleasures the world could offer, and yet he spoke constantly about the dangers of attachment to these pleasures. He wrote that indulgence should be approached with caution, that luxury should be enjoyed sparingly, and that true wealth was not in how much one had, but in how little one needed. He understood that comfort can make a person weak if they become dependent on it. That pleasure can be a thief in disguise, robbing a person of their resilience, their discipline, their ability to withstand difficulty. He practiced voluntary discomfort, choosing at times to live simply, to eat the most basic food, to wear the roughest clothing, so that he would never forget what truly mattered, so that he would never become a slave to comfort. It is not wrong to enjoy life. It is not wrong to appreciate pleasure. But there is a fine line between enjoyment and enslavement. A person who cannot be happy without pleasure is controlled by it. They are at its mercy. They are not free. But a person who can enjoy pleasure without needing it, who can let it come and go without losing their inner peace, this person is truly independent. This person has mastered themselves rather than being mastered by their desires. The modern world makes this even more difficult. Pleasure is everywhere. Instant gratification is the norm. At the push of a button, at the swipe of a screen, anything can be accessed. Entertainment, food, distraction, indulgence. It has never been easier to avoid discomfort, to numb pain, to escape boredom. But in this constant stimulation, something is lost. The ability to sit with silence, the ability to find contentment without external input, the ability to experience life deeply rather than merely consuming it. Many people are addicted to pleasure without even realizing it. They do not notice how restless they feel without stimulation. They do not realize how quickly they reach for distraction, for consumption, for the next source of entertainment. They mistake movement for progress, activity for fulfillment, indulgence for happiness. True happiness is not found in pleasure. It is found in mastery over it. It is found in the ability to experience pleasure without being controlled by it. This is what the Stoics meant by contentment, not the absence of joy, but the absence of need. A person who can remain at peace with or without pleasure, who can experience highs without craving them, who can endure discomfort without being shaken, this person is truly free. They are not bound by external conditions. They are not controlled by what they consume. They are not at the mercy of their desires. They have stepped off the hedonistic treadmill and found a deeper, more stable source of fulfillment. Pleasure is temporary. It is enjoyable, but it is not lasting. And lasting happiness is what the Stoics sought. They looked beyond the surface, beyond the temporary rush of indulgence, beyond the empty promises of luxury and excess. They sought something deeper, something unshakable. They understood that the mind is its own master, that it can either be ruled by cravings or it can rise above them, that happiness is not found in what is acquired but in what is cultivated within. The greatest power a person can have is not the ability to indulge, but the ability to remain content whether pleasure is present or not, the ability to stand in discomfort without losing peace, the ability to enjoy what comes without fearing its loss, the ability to find fulfillment not in chasing, but in being. Those who master this live differently. They do not run toward pleasure as if it will complete them. They do not fear discomfort as if it will destroy them. They remain steady, grounded, unshaken, because they have found what most never will, the ability to experience pleasure without being consumed by it, the ability to let go of external cravings and find something deeper, something real, something lasting. There is a fundamental truth that most people refuse to accept. The inability to say no is one of the greatest threats to inner peace. It is a slow erosion of self-respect, disguised as kindness, masked as obligation, and justified as social expectation. Every time a person says yes to something they do not truly want, They trade a piece of their time, energy, and freedom. They place another weight on their shoulders, another demand on their mind, another unnecessary responsibility that drains them. The world is filled with people who have built lives dictated by the expectations of others. They live in service to obligations they never agreed to. They stretch themselves thin to avoid disappointing those who take their time for granted. They suppress their own needs to accommodate the comfort of those who do not reciprocate the same courtesy. And in doing so, they lose something far more valuable than the approval of others. They lose themselves. Stoicism rejects this form of self-betrayal. The philosophy teaches that a person's energy is sacred. Their time is irreplaceable. Their mental space should be guarded like a fortress, not left open for anyone to invade. The Stoics did not advocate for isolation, nor did they encourage hostility, but they understood the difference between kindness and servitude, between generosity and self-sacrifice, between being helpful and being used. They knew that boundaries were not acts of cruelty but acts of wisdom, and they knew that a person who does not set limits will eventually find themselves exhausted, disrespected, and resentful. One of the most common reasons people struggle to say no is the fear of disappointing others. They convince themselves that rejecting a request is an act of selfishness, that refusing to comply makes them a bad person. This is the lie that keeps so many trapped in a cycle of overcommitment and emotional exhaustion. But the truth is far simpler. Saying no is not an attack. It is not an insult. It is not a betrayal. It is an act of self-preservation. It is the recognition that time is limited, that energy is finite, and that constantly stretching oneself to please others leads only to depletion. A person cannot give their best to the world if they are constantly drained by obligations they never wanted in the first place. Seneca, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, was a man who understood the power of choice. He spoke often about how people squander their lives, not because of dramatic losses or catastrophic failures, but because of small, daily compromises. They allow themselves to be pulled in 1,000 different directions, attending to matters that do not concern them, saying yes to things that do not serve them, engaging in conversations that do not enrich them. They give their most valuable resource, their time, away to people who do not respect its worth. And then they wonder why they feel empty, why they feel resentful, why they feel like their life is slipping away from them. It is because they have never learned to say no. They have never learned to protect their own peace. There is an undeniable power in a firm refusal. A person who can say no without guilt, without hesitation, without over-explaining, is a person who has mastered their own life. They are not controlled by the pressures of others. They are not manipulated by guilt. They do not fear rejection because they know that any relationship that crumbles due to a simple boundary was never built on mutual respect to begin with. They understand that real connections are not dependent on submission, but on honesty, and they know that people who respect them will accept their limits, while those who seek to exploit them will reveal themselves the moment a boundary is set. Marcus Aurelius, another great Stoic, often reflected on the nature of obligations. He reminded himself daily that external pressures have no real power unless they are given permission to influence the mind. That it is not the demands of others that create stress, but the willingness to comply with those demands. That peace is not found in trying to satisfy everyone, but in learning to detach from the expectations of those who do not understand the value of one's time. He lived with the understanding that life is short, that energy is precious, and that saying no to distractions is the only way to say yes to what truly matters. This is the paradox that many fail to grasp. Saying no is not a rejection of life. It is a refinement of it. It is a filtering process, a means of shaping one's existence with intentionality. A person who cannot say no is like a river with no banks, flowing aimlessly, pulled in every direction, shaped by whatever external force happens to be strongest in the moment. But a person who can set boundaries, who can refuse what doesn't serve them, who can choose where their energy goes with precision, this person is like a sculptor shaping their own masterpiece. They do not allow their life to be dictated by others. They do not waste time on what drains them. They focus only on what aligns with their values, their peace, their purpose. It is easy to underestimate the cost of constantly saying yes. It seems harmless in the moment. A small favor, a minor inconvenience, a quick task. But over time, these small compromises accumulate. They become a habit. They create a pattern of self-sacrifice that is difficult to break. And before long, a person finds themselves exhausted, stretched thin, drowning in obligations that they never truly wanted. The irony is that in trying to please everyone, they end up pleasing no one, not even themselves. Their energy is scattered, their patience is worn, their sense of peace is non-existent. This is the slow erosion of self-respect, the gradual decline of a life lived on one's own terms. The solution is simple, but not easy. It requires unlearning years of conditioning. It requires developing the courage to disappoint those who expect constant compliance. It requires building the strength to tolerate disapproval, to accept that not everyone will understand, to accept that some relationships will fade when boundaries are introduced. But what is lost in the short term is insignificant compared to what is gained. In saying no, a person reclaims their time. They regain control over their energy. They create space for what truly matters. They stop living reactively and start living intentionally. Boundaries are not barriers. They do not isolate. They protect. They do not push people away. They reveal who is truly meant to stay. A person who respects themselves enough to set limits does not live with resentment, does not feel overwhelmed by obligations, does not carry the weight of others' expectations on their back. They move through life with clarity, with focus, with a deep sense of peace that comes from knowing that they are not controlled by anything external, that their time is their own, that their energy is spent only on what truly aligns with their values. There is a quiet power in a simple refusal. It is not aggressive. It is not defensive. It is simply a statement of self-respect. A person who has mastered the art of saying no does not need to justify their decisions, does not need to seek approval, does not need to apologize for protecting their peace. They know that their life is their own, that their time is irreplaceable, that their energy is sacred. And because of this, they give it only to what truly matters. There is an undeniable truth that most people resist. Complexity does not bring happiness, it only creates distractions. The constant pursuit of more possessions, more commitments, more recognition, does not lead to contentment. It only leads to exhaustion. People fill their lives with things they do not need, obligations they do not want, and expectations they cannot sustain. They surround themselves with noise, believing that accumulation is the key to fulfillment. Yet, despite having more than ever before, they feel more lost, more anxious, and more disconnected. The world has convinced them that happiness lies in excess when, in reality, joy is found in simplicity. The Stoics understood this long before the modern world became consumed by materialism. They knew that true contentment is not found in chasing after possessions or constantly seeking new experiences, but in stripping life down to what is essential. They rejected the illusion that more is better and instead embraced the idea that less allows for clarity. When life is simplified, the mind is unburdened. There is no longer a need to keep up with endless desires, no longer a need to prove oneself through accumulation. The weight of unnecessary obligations disappears, and in its place there is peace. Seneca often warned about the dangers of excess, not only in material things, but also in mental clutter. He recognized that a life filled with too many distractions leads to a restless mind. When people are constantly chasing after what they do not have, they never appreciate what is already in front of them. They become prisoners of their own desires, always looking for the next thing to acquire, the next goal to achieve, the next source of external validation. But the moment they pause and strip away the unnecessary, something incredible happens. They realize that much of their stress, much of their dissatisfaction, much of their unhappiness comes not from a lack of things, but from an excess of them. Marcus Aurelius, despite being an emperor with access to unimaginable wealth and luxury, understood the power of simplicity. He reminded himself daily that possessions do not bring peace, that comfort does not equal fulfillment, and that reducing one's desires is far more powerful than fulfilling them. He trained his mind to detach from unnecessary luxuries, to avoid becoming dependent on comfort, and to embrace the idea that happiness is not something to be chased. It is something that arises naturally when one stops chasing. The paradox is that the more a person simplifies their life, the richer it becomes. When they remove what is unnecessary, they gain more time, more focus, and more mental clarity. When they let go of what does not serve them, they create space for what truly matters. Instead of cluttering their existence with distractions, they direct their energy toward what brings genuine fulfillment, relationships built on depth rather than status, experiences that enrich the soul rather than the ego, and a sense of purpose that is not dictated by the expectations of others. There is a reason why people feel overwhelmed despite having everything they once thought they wanted. They have allowed complexity to overtake their lives. They have filled their schedules with obligations, their homes with possessions, and their minds with endless distractions. They spend their days multitasking, juggling responsibilities, and chasing after an ever-moving goalpost. And yet, at the end of the day, they feel unfulfilled. They feel drained. They feel like something is missing. That missing piece is simplicity. The modern world thrives on making people believe they need more success, more achievements, more possessions. It convinces them that if they do not constantly move forward, they are falling behind. It fuels the illusion that happiness is found in having rather than being. But the truth is that fulfillment does not come from accumulation. It comes from alignment, from removing what does not serve, from focusing only on what truly adds value, from realizing that the most important things in life are rarely things at all. To simplify life is to reclaim power over it. It is to stop being controlled by desires that do not bring lasting satisfaction. It is to free oneself from the pressure of external expectations. It is to strip life down to what truly matters and let go of everything else. A person who embraces simplicity does not feel burdened by unnecessary worries, does not feel consumed by what they lack, does not live in a constant state of wanting more. They find joy in what is present. They cultivate peace by eliminating the unnecessary. They understand that true wealth is not measured by what one owns, but by how little one needs. Seneca advised that people should frequently ask themselves what they truly need versus what they have been conditioned to want. He warned against the trap of seeking pleasure in material excess, reminding that possessions can be lost, but inner peace, once cultivated, remains untouchable. He believed that the key to happiness is not in acquiring more, but in training the mind to be content with less. This is not a philosophy of deprivation, but one of liberation. It is not about living without. It is about living with only what is truly necessary. Simplicity allows for clarity. When life is not cluttered with distractions, the mind can focus. When one is not constantly reaching for the next thing, they can appreciate what is already in front of them. When obligations are reduced to what truly aligns with personal values, every action carries more meaning. It is not about doing less for the sake of doing less. It is about doing only what is essential. The Stoics saw this as the path to real freedom. One of the greatest misconceptions about simplicity is that it is restrictive. People fear that letting go of excess means giving up comfort, means losing something of value. But the opposite is true. Simplifying life does not take away, it adds. It creates space for deep connection. It allows time for true rest. It removes stress and distraction and replaces them with clarity and purpose. It shifts the focus from external markers of success to internal contentment. It turns life into something that is fully lived rather than merely managed. Marcus Aurelius urged himself to detach from anything that was not necessary for his well-being. He understood that possessions, titles, and luxuries could never replace the peace that comes from a disciplined mind. He practiced voluntary simplicity, not because he had to, but because he knew that true joy is not found in external things. It is found in a well-ordered soul. The world will always try to convince people that they need more, that they must keep accumulating, keep chasing, keep striving, but this is an illusion. A person who constantly needs more will never be satisfied. A person who cannot be content with little will not be content with much. The key to lasting joy is in the ability to appreciate life as it is, not as one wishes it to be. And this is what simplicity provides: the ability to find fulfillment in the present, to stop seeking happiness in the future, to free oneself from the endless pursuit of more. The art of a Stoic life is in recognizing that less is not a loss, it is a gain. It is the removal of distraction. It is the refinement of priorities. It is the cultivation of a mindset that is not swayed by the chaos of the world, but is rooted in the clarity of what truly matters. The person who masters this art does not feel the need to prove anything. They are not bound by comparison. They do not look to possessions to define them. They move through life with an effortless sense of peace, because they are not controlled by external forces. They are free, not because they have everything, but because they need nothing more than what they already have. There is a power so underestimated that most people dismiss it as frivolous, yet it is one of the greatest shields against suffering. It is an antidote to despair, a weapon against frustration, and a secret tool for resilience. Laughter. Not the shallow kind that masks insecurity, not the forced kind that hides discomfort, but the genuine ability to step back, see the absurdity of life, and refuse to be weighed down by what is ultimately fleeting. A mind that can laugh at its own misfortunes is a mind that refuses to be conquered. A person who can find humor even in difficulty possesses a strength that nothing can break. The Stoics understood this deeply. They did not advocate for humor as mere entertainment, but as a profound mental strategy. Seneca, one of the greatest Stoic thinkers, often mocked the futility of human complaints. He observed that people torment themselves over things that are laughably small in the grand scheme of existence. He knew that seriousness is not the same as wisdom, and that taking oneself too seriously is a form of self-imposed suffering. By learning to laugh at what is out of our control, we remove its ability to control us. A person who cannot find humor in their struggles will always be their own worst enemy. They will take every inconvenience personally, see every setback as a tragedy, and let minor frustrations fester into great burdens. They will resist reality instead of flowing with it, and in doing so, they will add unnecessary suffering to their lives. But the moment they allow themselves to see the absurdity of human nature, the unpredictability of fate, and the temporary nature of all hardship, they liberate themselves. A mind that can laugh at difficulties is a mind that cannot be broken by them. Laughter does not mean denial. It does not mean dismissing the gravity of real problems or pretending that pain does not exist. It means refusing to be consumed by them. It is the ability to acknowledge struggle without letting it define you, to face challenges without losing your sense of perspective. When Seneca wrote about wealth, he did not simply warn against greed. He laughed at the ridiculousness of people who believed that more money would bring them peace. He knew that the rich suffer the same anxieties as the poor, that kings toss and turn at night just as beggars do, and that those who cling desperately to their possessions are often the most miserable. The joke, as he saw it, was on those who thought happiness could be bought. Marcus Aurelius, though often portrayed as a deeply serious philosopher, also recognized the importance of perspective. He reminded himself daily that much of what disturbs people is trivial in the grand scheme of things. He did not mock human suffering, but he did mock the way people magnify their problems, treating temporary discomforts as unbearable tragedies. He saw through the illusion of permanence. He knew that what seems overwhelming today will be forgotten in a few years, or even a few weeks. And if that is true, why waste energy on unnecessary despair? Why not smile instead? Why not let go of the illusion that life must always go according to plan? The power of humor is that it shifts the weight of life. It turns frustration into amusement, anger into lightheartedness, and despair into resilience. When something goes wrong, most people react with stress, rage, or self-pity. But those who cultivate a Stoic mindset respond differently. They pause, they take a step back, and they ask, "Is this really worth my peace?" They see the humor in the situation, the absurdity of human nature, and the insignificance of most problems in the grand timeline of existence. They choose laughter, not as a way to escape, but as a way to remain unshaken. Seneca had a sharp wit, and he used it not just for amusement, but for survival. He lived in a time of political instability, under the reign of the unpredictable Emperor Nero. He knew what it was like to be at the mercy of forces beyond his control, to navigate a world filled with danger and uncertainty, and yet he never allowed fear to consume him. Instead, he joked about the foolishness of power-hungry men, about the way people clung to wealth as if it could save them from mortality, about the absurdity of human nature itself. His humor was not an escape. It was a weapon. It allowed him to face reality without being broken by it. People today face their own challenges, their own moments of despair, their own frustrations that seem unbearable in the moment. But what they forget is that they have a choice. They can let those struggles drain them, or they can laugh at them. They can see setbacks as tragedies, or they can see them as ridiculous bumps on a long road. They can drown in self-pity, or they can step back, see the humor in their situation, and move forward with lightness. This is not a denial of struggle. It is the ultimate acceptance of it. It is a refusal to let suffering take more than it already has. There is an old saying, if you can laugh at it, you can survive it. And this is precisely why humor is a stoic superpower. It is an unspoken understanding that no problem is as big as it seems in the moment, that no setback is the end of the world, and that no hardship has the right to steal your peace unless you allow it. People who take life too seriously make themselves prisoners of their own reactions. But those who can laugh at misfortune, who can see the absurdity of human nature, who can take a deep breath and let go instead of holding on to resentment, these are the ones who walk through life free. The world will never be perfect. There will always be obstacles, frustrations, disappointments. But humor transforms those difficulties into something lighter, something manageable. It does not change reality, but it changes how reality is experienced. It gives people the ability to move forward without the weight of unnecessary suffering. It allows them to navigate hardships without being defined by them. It turns the unpredictable chaos of life into something less intimidating. It makes the unbearable bearable. A person who learns to laugh at life is a person who cannot be controlled by it. They do not crumble under pressure. They do not let temporary difficulties turn into lifelong burdens. They understand that all things pass, that struggles come and go, and that taking everything too seriously is a recipe for misery. They do not dismiss pain, but they also do not worship it. They do not allow hardship to consume them. They simply step back, see the bigger picture, and choose to move forward with lightness. Humor is a form of strength. It is a refusal to be weighed down by what is out of one's control. It is a rejection of unnecessary suffering. It is the ability to see life for what it is: imperfect, unpredictable, sometimes frustrating, but also fleeting. And when one truly understands this, they no longer react to every setback with anger. They no longer see every problem as a catastrophe. They no longer let external chaos disrupt their inner peace. Instead, they cultivate the ability to laugh, to let go, and to keep moving forward with an unshakable mind. Seneca knew it. Marcus Aurelius knew it. The great Stoics all knew it. And those who embrace this wisdom today will find that life, even in its difficulties, becomes lighter, not because problems disappear, but because their weight no longer controls the mind. There is a silent thief that robs people of their lives, yet most never even notice. It doesn't break in loudly, it doesn't steal all at once, but moment by moment, piece by piece, it drains away time. The mind is constantly pulled away into the regrets of the past, into the anxieties of the future, into the endless distractions that make it impossible to fully experience what is right in front of them. And then, one day, they look back and wonder where it all went. They wonder how so much time passed without them ever truly living it. This is why the ability to remain in the present moment is not just a small habit. It is the very foundation of a meaningful life. Every joy, every lesson, every opportunity is found here, now. Yet most people live anywhere but here. They replay conversations that have already ended. They worry about problems that haven't even happened yet. They scroll mindlessly, filling their heads with thoughts that don't belong to them. They lose themselves in distractions, in overthinking, in a restless state that never allows them to simply be. and in doing so, they miss their own lives. The Stoics saw this problem thousands of years ago. They understood that the only true power a person has is in the present moment. The past is gone, beyond reach. The future is uncertain, unpredictable. But right now, this second, is the only place where action happens, where choices are made, where life is actually lived. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that nothing outside of this moment is truly real. Seneca warned that people waste time as if they have an unlimited supply, never realizing that every wasted second is a second that can never be reclaimed. Living in the present is not just about mindfulness, it is about reclaiming control. A person who is lost in the past is a prisoner of what no longer exists. A person obsessed with the future is a slave to what has not yet happened. But a person who masters the present is free. They are not burdened by regret, not paralyzed by fear, not lost in distractions. They act with clarity, they see with focus, they engage with life fully. They are awake while others sleepwalk through their existence. Most people think they live in the present, but they do not. Their bodies may be here, but their minds are elsewhere, caught in thought loops, scrolling through endless content, planning for things that may never happen. Even in conversation, they are not truly listening, but waiting for their turn to speak. Even in moments of beauty, they are not experiencing but documenting. They are always chasing something else, always looking for more, always feeling that what is happening now is not enough. But this is a dangerous illusion. The only life they will ever have is happening now, and if they don't learn to live it, they will lose it. There is a deep peace that comes with presence. It is the ability to simply exist without resistance, to fully taste food instead of rushing through meals, to fully hear music instead of letting it fade into background noise, to fully listen to a friend instead of waiting to respond, to fully engage with whatever is in front of them instead of constantly reaching for something else. This is where fulfillment is found, not in some future achievement, not in some distant goal, but in the ability to experience the present fully. A person who trains themselves to be present develops an unshakable mind. They are not easily distracted, not easily rattled, not easily swayed by the chaos around them. They do not waste time worrying about things they cannot control. They do not live in constant comparison, measuring their lives against filtered illusions. They are deeply rooted in reality, and because of this, they move through life with a quiet power. They do not react impulsively, but respond with clarity. They do not waste energy on what does not matter, but focus on what does. They are in control of themselves, and that is the greatest power a person can have. The key to presence is awareness. Most people move through life on autopilot, repeating the same patterns, thinking the same thoughts, reacting in the same ways. They do not notice how they are living because they have never taken a step back to observe themselves. But the moment they do, everything changes. The moment they become aware of their own distractions, of their own restless mind, of their own tendency to chase the future instead of living the now, they gain the power to change it. Awareness is the first step to freedom. To develop this awareness, the Stoics practiced daily reflection. Marcus Aurelius would write in his journal, reminding himself to stay present, to let go of what he could not control, to focus only on what was real. Seneca would remind himself that time was the most precious resource, that every day should be lived as if it were the last, because one day it would be. They knew that presence was not something that happened automatically. It was something that had to be trained. Just as the body must be strengthened through exercise, the mind must be disciplined to remain in the now. One of the simplest ways to cultivate presence is to engage the senses, to fully experience what is being seen, heard, touched, tasted, smelled, to notice the details that are usually overlooked, the warmth of sunlight on the skin, the depth of a single breath, the weight of the body against a chair, the sound of footsteps on the ground. These things seem small, but they are the doorway to reality. They anchor the mind in the present, pulling it away from the endless cycle of worry and regret. They remind the person that they are alive. Another way to cultivate presence is to slow down. Most people rush through life, treating each moment as a means to an end. They eat quickly, they speak quickly, they move quickly, but in doing so, they miss everything. The Stoics taught the value of stillness, of patience, of deep engagement with life. They knew that a slow moment, fully lived, is worth more than a rushed lifetime. Slowing down does not mean doing less. It means experiencing more. Presence also means letting go of the illusion of control. Most of the anxiety that pulls people out of the present moment comes from trying to control what cannot be controlled. They worry about how others see them, about what might happen in the future, about things that are completely outside their power. But the truth is, most of life is out of control. The only thing a person can truly govern is their own mind, their own actions, their own responses. And when they learn to let go of everything else, they gain a peace that nothing can shake. A person who lives in the present does not waste time chasing happiness because they know it is already here. They do not postpone joy, waiting for some future moment to be enough. They do not tell themselves, "I will be happy when I achieve this, when I buy that, when I reach that goal." They know that if they cannot find fulfillment now, they will not find it later. They know that the greatest mistake a person can make is waiting to live. This is why presence is the ultimate key to happiness. It removes the need for external validation. It breaks the cycle of never-ending desire. It allows a person to experience life fully, without the mental clutter that weighs most people down. It turns small moments into profound experiences. It transforms ordinary days into something extraordinary. It gives the power to actually live instead of just existing. The world is filled with distractions, with things designed to pull attention away from the present moment. But those who master presence master life itself. They are not controlled by the past, not consumed by the future, not lost in endless worry. They are fully here, fully engaged, fully alive. And in that, they find a joy that no amount of chasing could ever bring. There is a moment in every life when something cherished is taken away. A person, an opportunity, a sense of certainty, gone, often without warning, often before one is ready to let go. The mind resists, grasping at what no longer exists, aching for what cannot return. This is the weight of loss. It is the sharp realization that life moves forward, regardless of whether one is prepared, and for many, it feels unbearable. Yet the truth is undeniable. Nothing lasts. Every moment dissolves into the next. Every person will one day part ways. Every possession will one day belong to someone else. Every phase of life will eventually end. But despite knowing this, people still resist. They cling. They grieve not only for what has been lost, but for the illusion that anything was ever permanent to begin with. The pain of loss is not just in the absence, it is in the refusal to accept the nature of life itself. The Stoics faced this reality head-on. They did not shy away from it, did not sugarcoat it. did not tell themselves comforting lies. They saw life for what it was, a constant unfolding, a series of changes, an unbroken chain of moments that could never be held in place. And in that understanding, they found peace. Because when one stops resisting change, they stop suffering from it. When one embraces impermanence, they stop fearing it. This is not about becoming numb. It is not about pretending loss does not hurt. It is about learning to live in harmony with the truth rather than against it. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that everything he loved would one day be gone, not to make himself miserable, but to make himself grateful. Seneca wrote about loss not as a tragedy, but as an inevitability to be met with strength. Epictetus taught that attachment to anything external was a guarantee of suffering, because sooner or later everything external would be taken away. The key to dealing with loss is understanding that nothing was ever truly yours to begin with. A person does not own their loved ones. They are simply fortunate to share time with them. A person does not own their success. They are simply given the opportunity to experience it while it lasts. A person does not own stability, because stability is nothing more than a temporary illusion. Everything borrowed from life must one day be returned. Those who refuse to accept this spend their days grasping at smoke. Many people resist this idea because they believe acceptance means indifference. But the opposite is true. When one accepts that nothing lasts, they cherish everything more. They no longer take people for granted, no longer waste time, no longer assume they have forever. They love fully, without hesitation, because they understand that love is not about possession, but appreciation. They enjoy moments deeply because they know moments do not repeat. They live in such a way that when loss comes, they do not crumble under regret, but meet it with the quiet understanding that nothing was ever promised. Loss does not have to be the end. It can be a beginning. If everything is always changing, then even the hardest moments are not permanent. The grief that feels overwhelming will not last forever. The emptiness left behind will eventually be filled with something new. Life does not stop simply because one chapter closes. It continues, unfolds, surprises. And those who embrace change rather than resist it find that loss, rather than breaking them, becomes a source of transformation. This is why the Stoics trained themselves to expect loss, not with dread, but with calm preparation. They practiced detachment not because they wished to avoid love, but because they wished to love freely, without fear. They reminded themselves daily that they were not in control of the universe, only of their own minds. And a mind that accepts change is a mind that cannot be shaken by it. The greatest mistake is to believe that security comes from holding on. True security comes from letting go. When a person no longer fears loss, they are no longer controlled by it. When a person stops resisting the inevitable, they gain a freedom that cannot be taken away. And in that freedom, they find the ability to move forward, to live fully, to face whatever comes with strength rather than sorrow. This is not easy. It requires a shift in how one sees the world. It requires a willingness to step beyond comfort and into reality. But those who do will find that loss, while painful, is not the enemy. It is a teacher. It strips away illusions. It reveals what truly matters. It reminds one that every moment is precious precisely because it cannot be kept. And once a person truly understands this, they stop wasting time. They stop hesitating. They stop living as if they have forever, because they know they do not. And in that knowledge, they finally start living as they were meant to, fully, deeply, without fear. Loss strips away illusions. It forces a person to see life as it truly is, uncertain, ever-changing, beyond control. But in that realization, something powerful emerges. The awareness that while one cannot dictate the course of external events, they can master their response to them. This is where true power lies, not in preventing change, but in developing the inner strength to remain unshaken by it. And this strength is built on a foundation deeper than fleeting emotions, momentary pleasures, or external achievements. It is built on virtue. The world misleads people into thinking happiness is something to chase, something to acquire. It tells them that wealth, status, and comfort will bring peace. That admiration from others will fill the emptiness inside. That once the perfect circumstances align, life will finally feel whole. But the Stoics understood that this is a lie. Nothing external can guarantee happiness, because everything external is unstable. A person who builds their happiness on possessions, reputation, or circumstances is like someone building a house on shifting sand. The foundation will crumble, and with it, their sense of peace. True happiness is not found in what one owns, achieves, or gains. It is found in who they are. It is found in the character they cultivate, the principles they live by, the strength they develop through discipline and integrity. Virtue is not just an abstract ideal. It is the key to lasting fulfillment. A person who acts with courage, honesty, and wisdom does not need to rely on external validation, because their peace comes from within. They are not at the mercy of fortune, because they have built something that cannot be taken away. Integrity is the foundation of this strength. A person who compromises their values for temporary gain may find success, but they will not find peace. The mind knows when it has betrayed itself. It knows when it has acted in ways that contradict what is right. And no amount of external achievement can silence the inner unrest that comes from dishonesty, hypocrisy, or weakness. Integrity is the anchor that keeps a person steady, no matter the chaos around them. It is what allows them to look in the mirror without shame, to face the world without fear, to walk through life with a sense of unshakable confidence. Those who live with integrity do not need approval from others, because they have already gained the approval of the only person that matters, themselves. Courage is the force that allows integrity to stand firm. It is easy to live by one's values when there is no opposition, no temptation, no risk. But life does not work that way. There will always be pressure to conform, to take the easy road, to compromise what is right for what is convenient. Without courage, even the strongest convictions collapse under fear. But those who cultivate courage refuse to be ruled by fear. They understand that difficulty is not a reason to abandon virtue. It is the test that proves it. A person who has courage does not waver when others doubt them, does not break when challenges arise, does not shrink back when faced with uncertainty. They stand firm, not because they are never afraid, but because they refuse to let fear dictate their actions. And in that strength, they find peace. Wisdom is what ensures that courage and integrity are not wasted on meaningless pursuits. Many people act with confidence, but in the wrong direction. They chase goals that do not truly matter, fight battles that are not worth fighting, sacrifice things of real value for temporary satisfaction. Wisdom is what allows a person to step back, to see clearly, to understand what is truly important. It is what prevents them from being ruled by impulse, from wasting their energy on things that do not align with their highest values. A person who has wisdom does not need to be constantly chasing, constantly striving, constantly seeking more. They recognize what is enough. They know when to act and when to let go, and because of that, they are never at war with themselves. Aligning daily actions with virtue is not a matter of grand gestures or dramatic transformations. It is built in the small moments, the quiet decisions, the daily discipline of choosing what is right over what is easy. It is in the way one speaks, the way one treats others, the way one handles difficulty. It is in the refusal to lie, even when it would be convenient. In the strength to keep a promise, even when no one is watching. In the ability to remain calm in the face of provocation, to stay patient when things go wrong, to persist when the path is difficult. These are the moments where virtue is tested, and these are the moments where true happiness is either built or destroyed. A person who chooses virtue over convenience gains something that cannot be taken away. They develop an inner stability that does not depend on circumstances, an unshakable peace that does not require validation, a deep and lasting fulfillment that cannot be bought or lost. This is why the Stoics saw virtue as the highest good, not because it was moral in some abstract sense, but because it was the only path to real contentment. Everything else, wealth, pleasure, status, could disappear in an instant. But a person who has cultivated integrity, courage, and wisdom will always have something of value, no matter what life throws at them. Many people look for shortcuts to happiness, but there are none. A person may distract themselves with pleasures, bury themselves in achievements, seek endless entertainment to numb the discomfort of an undisciplined mind. But none of these things will last. They are temporary escapes, not solutions. The only true solution is to build a foundation so strong that no storm can shake it. And that foundation is built, brick by brick, through virtue. The world will always try to pull people away from this path. It will tempt them with comfort, lure them with distractions, convince them that happiness is somewhere out there, just out of reach. But those who understand the truth know that happiness is not something to find. It is something to build. It is something to cultivate day after day through the way one lives, the choices one makes, the discipline one develops. The reward of this path is not immediate. It does not give the rush of pleasure that comes from indulgence, does not provide the instant gratification that comes from taking the easy road. But what it does provide is far more valuable. It provides a sense of inner peace that cannot be shaken, a quiet confidence that cannot be stolen, a deep and lasting joy that does not depend on anything external. And once a person has built that, they are free. Free from the endless chase for more. Free from the anxiety of uncertainty. Free from the fear of losing what was never truly in their control to begin with. This is the path of the Stoic. It is not the easiest path, but it is the only path that leads to true, unshakable happiness. Everything up to this point has revealed a truth that most people spend a lifetime avoiding. Happiness is not found in the external world, not in the things people acquire, not in the validation they seek, not in fleeting pleasures that vanish as soon as they are grasped. The pursuit of happiness without a clear foundation leads to frustration, discontent, and a constant feeling that something is missing. But what if the problem is not the world, not circumstances, not the failures and misfortunes that inevitably come, but the lack of a guiding philosophy, a personal framework that serves as an unshakable foundation for lasting joy? Most people drift through life without ever asking the fundamental questions that shape their existence. What principles should govern their actions? What truly matters in the long run? What kind of person do they want to become? Without clear answers, they are left vulnerable to the whims of emotion, external pressures, and the illusions of society. They are like a ship without a rudder, tossed around by the waves, always reacting, never truly directing their own course. A personal philosophy is what separates those who live with clarity, purpose, and fulfillment from those who constantly feel lost. Building a personal life philosophy is not about adopting rigid beliefs or forcing oneself into a strict set of rules. It is about understanding what brings genuine peace, what aligns with one's deepest values, and what ensures that happiness is not left to chance. Without it, people are at the mercy of whatever mood they wake up in, whatever trend society pushes onto them, and whatever circumstances dictate at any given moment. With it, they gain the ability to navigate life with resilience, to remain stable even in uncertainty, and to find joy that is rooted in something deeper than momentary pleasure. At the heart of any meaningful life philosophy is the understanding that happiness is not a destination, but a way of living. It is not something that happens to people when they finally get what they want, but something they cultivate through their daily actions, choices, and mindset. The mistake most people make is treating happiness as a prize at the end of a long journey, rather than something that can be built in every moment through the way they think and behave. This is where Stoicism provides clarity. It does not offer vague promises of a perfect life, but a framework for creating fulfillment regardless of external conditions. A solid life philosophy begins with self-examination. Most people never take the time to truly ask themselves what they believe, why they believe it, and whether those beliefs actually lead to a meaningful existence. Without this examination, they fall into the trap of adopting whatever the world tells them they should value: money, status, admiration, without questioning whether these things bring true joy. The first step to building a personal philosophy is stripping away everything that has been imposed by society, by childhood conditioning, by blind habit, and asking what truly matters. This process requires brutal honesty. Many people lie to themselves about what will make them happy. They chase things not because they genuinely value them, but because they think they should. They seek approval because they have never known how to stand firmly in their own self-worth. They pursue wealth not because they love the work they do, but because they fear being seen as unsuccessful. Clarity begins when one is willing to admit their own illusions and let go of the false beliefs that have kept them trapped in cycles of dissatisfaction. A personal philosophy is not just about removing illusions, but about replacing them with principles that create real fulfillment. The Stoics built their framework around virtue, wisdom, and the mastery of perception. They understood that happiness does not come from external gains, but from living in a way that is aligned with one's highest values. A person who lives in constant contradiction, wanting peace but indulging in chaos, wanting self-respect but compromising their integrity, wanting deep fulfillment but chasing shallow pleasures, will always feel restless. But a person whose actions and values are in harmony experiences a kind of quiet, lasting joy that does not depend on anything outside of themselves. One of the core aspects of building a personal philosophy is defining what is within one's control and what is not. This is where many people go wrong. They pour energy into things they have no power over, worrying endlessly about the opinions of others, stressing over outcomes they cannot dictate, attaching their happiness to things that can be taken away at any moment. A solid philosophy recognizes that control is an illusion in most aspects of life, except for one's own thoughts, actions, and responses. When a person fully embraces this, they stop wasting energy on external things and instead focus on mastering themselves. Clarity of purpose is another essential part of crafting a life philosophy. Many people live reactively, making decisions based on short-term desires, fleeting emotions, and external pressure, rather than a clear, long-term sense of purpose. Without direction, they are constantly pulled in different directions, never truly knowing what they are working toward or why. A strong philosophy includes defining one's purpose, not necessarily in the sense of a singular career path or passion, but in terms of the kind of life one wants to live, the kind of person one wants to be, and the kind of impact one wants to leave on the world. The structure of a personal philosophy is not meant to be rigid, but adaptable. Life is unpredictable, and any philosophy that does not account for change and growth will eventually fail. Stoicism does not require blind adherence to unchanging rules. Rather, it offers guiding principles that can be applied flexibly in different situations. The key is to establish a foundation that remains firm even as circumstances shift. This means cultivating habits that reinforce one's values, developing mental practices that strengthen resilience, and continuously refining one's understanding of what truly leads to fulfillment. One of the most powerful practices in refining a life philosophy is daily reflection. Marcus Aurelius journaled each night, not to record events, but to examine his thoughts, actions, and where he had succeeded or failed in living according to his values. This is not a practice of self-judgment, but of self-improvement. When a person takes time each day to ask themselves whether they acted with integrity, whether they responded with wisdom, whether they remained in control of their emotions, they create the awareness necessary to stay aligned with their philosophy. Without reflection, it is easy to drift, to fall back into old habits, to lose sight of the principles that were once so clear. A philosophy is only as strong as the actions that support it. It is easy to claim to value patience, but lose one's temper over small inconveniences. It is easy to say that integrity is important, but compromise on honesty when it becomes inconvenient. Words mean nothing without action. The true test of a life philosophy is whether it is lived daily, in the smallest moments, in the decisions that no one else sees, in the thoughts that shape one's internal world. A person whose actions and philosophy are in alignment does not feel conflicted, does not experience the dissonance that comes from living in contradiction. They experience something rare in the modern world: inner peace. Happiness is not something that just happens. It is cultivated, built intentionally through the choices one makes each day. It is not found in any single achievement or possession, but in the way one moves through life, in the way one perceives challenges, in the way one treats others and themselves. A person without a philosophy is easily swayed, easily disturbed, easily controlled by forces outside themselves. A person with a clear philosophy, grounded in wisdom and virtue, is unshakable. At the core of all of this is one simple truth. Happiness is not about what one has, but about how one lives. When a person builds a framework rooted in integrity, courage, and self-mastery, they are no longer dependent on external circumstances for their joy. They do not need to chase, to grasp, to endlessly seek. They simply live in accordance with their highest values, and in doing so, they find something more powerful than momentary pleasure. They find true, lasting fulfillment. Happiness has never been about chasing, grasping, or endlessly seeking more. It has always been about mastering what is within, shaping the mind, and aligning daily actions with timeless principles. The Stoics understood what so many today ignore. Lasting happiness is not found in wealth, approval, or fleeting pleasures. It is cultivated through discipline, wisdom, gratitude, and an unshakable mindset that remains steady in the face of life's storms. You now hold the keys to something most people spend their lives searching for, but never truly grasp. You know how to detach from what you cannot control, how to transform pain into wisdom, how to build a personal philosophy that serves as a fortress against chaos. You understand that simplicity brings clarity, that laughter is a form of resilience, that boundaries are not walls, but gateways to inner peace. And most importantly, you now know that true happiness is not given. It is built, moment by moment, through the choices you make every single day. Now, it's time to turn knowledge into action. Which of these Stoic insights resonated with you the most? What is the one principle you're going to start applying today? Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and insights. And if you found value in this, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more wisdom that will challenge your perspective and elevate your life. Because the pursuit of true happiness is not a destination. It's a lifelong practice. Keep growing, keep learning, and most of all, keep mastering your mind.